Good evening and welcome to the Select Board meeting. Today is Tuesday, March 4th, 2025, at 7 p.m. Please be advised that this open meeting is being broadcast live and recorded for playback by WRPS at youtube.com/WRPS Rockland. Please go to WRPSRockland.com for further information. Please also be advised that the open meeting law gives the chair of a public body discretion to decide if public comment will be permitted, but the law does not require that a public body allow public comment or public participation during its meetings. Vice Chair Childs, can you start us off in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have community announcements.
Thanks, Tiffany. The same announcement we've been making for a while now, which is that we have our revised Plan B fire station building project that'll be presented to voters at the annual town election in April and the annual town meeting in May. We encourage everyone to go out to vote. And as part of our outreach efforts, which are going to just start getting ramped up shortly, the chief and I are going to be doing a video interview, which we'll push out on all of our platforms, including social media, try to answer some of the frequently asked questions. And then in addition to that, the chief and the Fire Station Building Committee are going to do a number of presentations and outreach meetings. There's going to be one on March 11th at 6 o'clock, on March 18th at 10 a.m. and March 26th at 7 p.m. at different locations. We'll push all this information out. But I would really encourage folks to attend the public outreach meetings, look at our website. There's a ton of material. Look at our social media. And last but not least, of course, call me at Town Hall or call the chief at the fire station with any questions that anybody might have. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Next, we have the minutes from February 4th, 2025. Do I have a motion to approve minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Next, we have the building department recommended fee increase, and we have the building commissioner here. Tom, if you could come on up.
And just as a reminder, while Tom's coming up, he was up at our previous meeting. You did approve some of the new construction recommended increases, but you had some concerns possibly about some of the other residential ones, and you wanted more time to think about it. So what I tried to put in your packet shows what was not approved, and then on the last page of it, you'll see I put in red approved for what you did last time. And again, Tom's here to further discuss.
Great. As I understand, we are coming together today. First of all, I wanted to seek from the board, are there any other questions or for the commissioner or any concerns to address?
No, I think I was the one that asked for this to be tabled at the time. And the superintendent had given quite a few towns as comparables to the Rockland rates. I wanted to dig in and look at a few more. I dug in, I looked at some more communities and the points at which they had most recently increased their fees, and everything seems to be in line. I mean, there are some that I still feel might be high, but it's nothing out of the ordinary in this region. So.
Great. Any other questions or concerns? No. With that, may I have a motion to approve the building department recommended fee increases?
Motion to approve.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
I thank you.
Next, we have a charter review committee update, and I do understand Rich Penny is in the room.
It's
Oh,
Karen.
okay.
And Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
How are you?
Welcome.
Thank you. Here's my parents. I literally ran here. Did you have any questions before I begin?
No,
This
we'll
is my
let
first
you-
time speaking is on behalf of a committee, so sorry.
Well, thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you. So our proposed changes to our initial proposed charter, which didn't pass last year, was to keep the elected positions as elected. We're updating the recall process to include the word sworn statement to coincide with Massachusetts laws. We're keeping the quorum at 150 instead of 100, moving it down to 100. And then we're removing the proposed language about the town administrator having the authority to reorganize departments. Other than that, the rest of the language stays the same, because most of it was just consolidation and language cleanup.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Do we have any questions or comments?
I don't,
All right, with that,
Good?
thank you for the update
Okay.
tonight.
That was quick. Sorry, thank you.
Can I just add one point
Yes,
before
please.
Karen leaves? The last language, it wasn't just the town administrator that had the authority, it was the town administrator with the approval of the select board. So I just wanted, so the public is, and I think you all knew that, but just so the public was aware, it was the select board that ultimately had the final say in whether we reorganize or not. So that is a significant issue.
Next, we have the Pleasant Street landfill fill and cap project, and may I welcome Dan Manning and Jay Chinkata from Clean Fields LLC. Hello, please come on up.
And if I could just, I'll give it to you in one sec. I'll bring it over if you guys want to have a seat. And just while they're coming up, I'd like to give just a very brief introduction, if I can. I'll just use like the arrow keys. Leave the last to go forward and back. So just as a very, I won't steal their thunder, but just as a very quick introduction, we have two landfills in town. We have the Beach Street landfill that everybody's very familiar with. That's where our recycling center is. And then we have the Pleasant Street landfill, which not as many people are familiar with because the Pleasant Street landfill is inactive and closed. That's right off of VFW Drive. I've been mentioning this generally like once a year since I started because we're required through the DEP to have quarterly monitoring by an external engineering company to test for, hazardous materials, that type of thing. And it was explained to me early on when I got here that at some point in the future, the DEP is going to require us to properly cap the landfill because while it's closed, it's not capped. And a number of years ago, when I first learned about this here, the engineers told me a super rough guess ballpark, I'm doing this metaphorically of just like pulling a number out of the air, probably around like the $5 million range for what it would cost to properly cap it per DEP requirements. As we all know through whether it's the South Shore Tech project, the fire station project, all the different types of projects that have required tax increases recently, voters have expressed their concern about increasing taxes and their ability to pay, and they've asked us to look at other ways to finance costs other than going back to taxpayers time after time after again. So then you fast forward now a number of years later, because again, this is on the capital plan a number of years out because we're not required to cap it today, but we know it will happen eventually. So then you fast forward a number of years, we were able to hire our first permanent town planner, Allison Quinn. Allison, in just doing her due diligence in the community, said, hey, there's firms that I'm aware of that work on these types of projects that can bring material, if there's an agreement between the town and the entity, they can bring in material at no cost, but then that private company will take all of the expenses and pay to fully cap the landfill, fulfill all DEP requirements, and then potentially construct amenities on top, ball fields, pickleball courts, dog parks, whatever you want. It's like a public-private partnership. So it's a great way to find an alternative path to solving this problem that doesn't involve a tax increase. So through Allison and Courtney's efforts and their network, we started just talking with the firm that's going to give a presentation shortly. As the board knows, we gave them, we authorized a non-exclusive license agreement for them to be able to access the landfill so they could do their own due diligence. So when they're done with their presentation, there's sort of two broad questions I'm going to have for you relates to do you want us to continue exploring something like this? Because I got some feedback from some residents that were worried that decisions had been made. No decisions have been made yet. You're just learning about this in detail tonight in the presentation in a moment. So first question is, would you like us to continue to explore an alternative like this, or would you prefer that we just work with the traditional debt exclusion process tax increase? And then the second question I'll have for you at the end is, if you do want to continue to explore something like this, and based on what you hear tonight, are you comfortable working with this firm directly, or would you like us to go forward and issue a request for proposals, an RFP, to have a sort of broader search? And we included information in your packet that I got from this firm, which Attorney Galvin has reviewed and agrees that because of the complexities and details of this type of arrangement and the state procurement laws, we are not required to go out to do an RFP if you want to do a project like this because of the details you'll see in that opinion. But you're certainly always able to if you want to. So that'll be the second question. So if you can just tuck those two questions in the back of your mind, with that, I'll turn it over to these guys to do their presentation.
I feel like my thunder's been stolen. I want to thank you for the opportunity today. I want to thank Doug, and this has actually been a very good experience for us in looking at the Pleasant Street landfill as a potential site for remediation and to create a real public asset. And we think that there's some really good opportunity here. So just to start, who are we in Clean Fields? My name is Jason Sincotti. This is Dan Manning, and actually, gentleman back there, Jack Walsh, he's another one of our partners. We weren't expecting him to be here, otherwise he would be on the slide. We are Clean Fields. We are a company that's been set up dedicated to this idea that there are these existing inactive, uncapped landfills that are drags on many communities, and we think that there's a real opportunity here to transform these into real benefits, and that's sort of where we're going from. We have a very broad range of experience as we come into this, ranging from community organizing and advocacy work to municipal administration to extensive amount of experience in the waste management industry, overseeing projects exactly like this. Now, I'm going to be upfront. We are a new firm. This is a new collection. We've come together to do this. So Clean Fields' track record is not very extensive, but this is an instance where the whole is much greater than the sum of its parts. I have been working as a consultant to the waste industry for about 10 years, working on community relations and working again as sort of a community activist or advocate. My background is one of organizing and advocacy work. A lot of the work that I do is around actually charter changes and working with communities to move forward with charter changes, or doing a lot of debt exclusions or 2.5 overrides for typically around school MSBA type stuff. I do a lot of that kind of work. Daniel has about 10 years of experience. He was deputy commissioner for the ISD office in the city of Boston. He actually was responsible for keeping us all fed in Boston because he oversaw during the COVID pandemic, the ability to make takeout more available, keeping everybody safe and healthy. But that was just one part of his job at ISD. He oversaw a heck of a lot of development work, permitting work, ensuring that developments happen within compliance to municipal, state, and federal regulations. And then Jack is our really industry person. He has 30 plus years working in the waste industry as an independent contractor, with firms, but also with other large waste companies. And Jack has actually done these kinds of projects many times over, where they take these landfills and turn them into parks or solar fields or that kind of stuff. In addition to our team, we also have a vast network of partners that we would be looking to bring in. The environmental engineering partners is probably the biggest, most important piece of this. We have relationships with almost every environmental engineering firm in the state, and we sort of go through them all to have conversations to find out who has the experience, who would be best fitted to work on potential projects. The firm that actually does the environmental monitoring for this site, CDM Smith, is one of those firms that we have a relationship with. With that said, our recommendation, if we were to move forward, and obviously we would love to move forward, but you have a process that you need to go through. You have to make that decision. what we decided was that it makes more sense for us to maintain CDM Smith as an independent review entity on behalf of the town. So if we were to move forward, we actually have allocated in the budget money set aside for the town to pay CDM Smith to review every single thing that we put forward. We'd be working with another engineering firm to do all the design work, to help us develop the permitting path. We've had some very, very preliminary conversations with DEP about what sorts of things might be required. And basically every single step of the way, we want you to be aware and involved with what we're talking about doing, because my history of community organizing, more communication is never a bad thing. And we want to make sure you guys are coming along with us on this path, and that you have an understanding. If you have a question that gets answered, if there is some change that you'd want to see, is that feasible? Is that realistic? How can it do? And because you have an existing relationship with CDM Smith, it just made sense for us to ensure that you had this sort of professional advocate to double check the work that we're doing. In addition to that, we've got a number of different construction and operational partners. One of those partners is a company called Atlantic Excavation and Utilities. They're based out of Brighton, Massachusetts. And actually, they came down with us, walked the site 2 or 3 times, just to get an idea of what we were looking at and what the sort of logistical implications of trying to do some work on this site might involve. And there are some complexities with respect to the Pleasant Street landfill that we're always gonna get into. So what is it that we do? The first thing that we do is we focus on the post-closure use. We look at these sites and we say, what's your vision for them, right? The lots of different things that you could do with these sites, as Doug had mentioned. You can just create a park, you can create recreational fields, you can create solar farms, you can let the nature take over and create hiking paths, those sorts of things. There really is a number of different options that you have available to you. And at the front side, we want to obviously be working with you to ensure that whatever we're creating is what you want and it fits in with the larger vision that you have for this area, for this parcel, and for the town. Obviously, critical to that is capping the inactive landfill, right? This landfill is about 50 years old, 48 years old right now. And basically it's just a big pile of trash that's sitting on about 12 acres, right? You do have constant monitoring to ensure that the groundwater and the water table is safe, because the work that CDM Smith is doing is to test for leachate materials. And as of right now, there does not seem to be, some seepage going in, but that could change. And we obviously want to, be proactive in addressing this. This is not a sky is falling and you guys need to take action today. But as Doug had said, this is subject to DEP enforcement, and tomorrow they could come down and say, you got to fix this. And so we're trying to think of a way that we can get ahead of that and create a solution. And then ultimately, we want to take dirty sites, protect the environment, clean them up. So as I said, the types of post-closure use that we would be looking at, there's honestly, the only limit is your imagination with respect to this kind of stuff. But most of the time you see parks, you see recreation fields. Granite Links in Quincy is actually a really good example of this, right? Granite Links was a couple of different landfills and a quarry, and they did exactly what we're talking about doing. There's a reason why Pleasant Street hasn't been addressed yet, and as I said, I'm going to get to that a little bit later on in the presentation. And then I understand too, Beach Street also, they got a solar field there, right? Yeah, so some of the work that was already done over at Beach Street is an example of what we're talking about. And again, you should bear in mind, why was Beach Street done but not Pleasant Street? So this slide is a little bit, there was some contention amongst our group, should we include it, should we not? And I decided that I wanted to, so bear with me. When we started this firm, Danny asked me, he said, what is it that we believe in? What is it that we're about? It's not what we sell, it's not who we are. What is that ness that we care about? And I thought about it, and honestly, it's the win-win scenario, or the win-win solution. We are, I feel, trained to think zero-sum gain is the only way things work. In order for me to benefit, you have to lose, right? And honestly, I believe that is just based out of a lack of creativity and a lack of effort. right? I believe in the win-win scenario. I believe that if we look at a problem, there is a way for us to all benefit, for us to all move forward together. We don't need to have one person lose in order for another person to win. I'm a little bit idealistic in that, but fundamentally, that's what Clean Fields is about. It's about finding win-win scenarios and advancing on them. And if you didn't like that slide, it's my fault that I'm talking about it. It's Dan's fault that he put it in my head. So what brings us to today? As Doug had mentioned, we actually, when we came together, went to the DEP's website. There is a listing of inactive landfills. There's about 750 inactive landfills across the state of Massachusetts. And, we said, okay, well, what are our priorities? And the priorities for what we want to look at are municipally owned landfills that are inactive and not capped. And why are those the landfills that we want to look at? Because cities and towns are struggling to make ends meet, right? You could go to a private company, you could go to a private landfill, you could do the same kind of work with them, right? But the larger community benefit, it doesn't exist, right? There are examples of the private sector, working and doing this for great benefit. There's actually one of these landfills in Lynn, Massachusetts that's going to be coming online as a park, I think this spring. And that was a landfill that was right on the water that was owned by a private company, but they worked with the city, and another company came in to do the development work, and that then gets transferred over to the city of Lynn as a new park. But for us, and honestly, because of my background and Danny's background in the public sector and sort of working with cities and towns, we wanted to sort of make sure that the work that we're doing is going to benefit communities and to help solve municipal problems. I hope that makes sense. So we looked at the list of inactive landfills, and the Pleasant Street landfill conformed to what we were looking to do. So Danny had reached out. I don't know if Danny reached out to Allison, but I think that's what happened. And then, he was able to line it up. Allison brought us in. We had a conversation with Courtney and with Doug. And after a couple conversations, we entered into, as Doug had mentioned, a non-exclusive revocable license that gives us the ability to do the due diligence work that we wanted to do. That due diligence work involved a number of site visits where we were going on the site, walking around, looking to see what it was. As I'd mentioned, we brought some engineers and did some work. We brought some operational partners to do some work to just really get a sense of what the site looked like and what that potential vision could be for future use. In addition to that, we did a FOIA request. We received all of the documentation that the DEP had on the Pleasant Street landfill. We sort of reviewed all of that information to see, are there red flags? Are there things that we really need to be mindful of as we look to go forward? Are there any things that would say, this is not a problem, this is not a project that we would have the capacity to do, or there were other larger red flags that we would need to be aware of? If that was the case, I would still be here talking to you, but I would be talking to you saying, here's the thing that you need to be worried about, right? When we looked at the DEP review, we saw that there was this document that was a little bit squirrely. We didn't see anything like that gave us any significant concern. And then the final thing that we did is we did a preliminary economic analysis, looking at the capacity of the site, looking at the costs that we think are likely to be associated with it. The number that Doug pulled out of the air, we're going to make that happen, pulled out of the air. Is right. $5 million is probably on the low end of the amount of money that it would take to cap the site. That probably would also cover some of the environmental mitigation work that has to happen on the edge that abuts the wetlands. But that would be out-of-pocket expense to you, right? Like that's the number that I'm going to show you is a little bit higher than that, but that number also includes other things that we would be assuming responsibility for. But again, the nature of this kind of project, the economics of the project completely cover all of those costs. So when we look at this project, there is no reason why the town should come out of pocket for any money to make this happen. That's another reason why every step along the way, as we're working through this, we want you involved, because we want you to sort of see, these are what the economic projections are, this is where we're going, this is what's happening. So, we really want this to be truly a win-win. So we're talking about the Pleasant Street landfill, which on the DEP's website, and as far as DEP records go, it's not called Pleasant Street, it's actually called the VFW Drive landfill. but you know, we're calling it Pleasant Street because that's where the access point is. This landfill was established in 1976. It is just over 12 acres of land on 2 different parcels, and it is currently listed as inactive on the DEP. Inactive, not closed. And the difference between those two is a closed landfill is one that has had all of the environmental mitigation, capping, all of those things, you know, having had taken place. What does this mean? This means that this landfill, as I said, it's unlined and it's not capped, and it does create some liability for the town because you are subject to DEP enforcement, right? One of the things that we did when we were doing our preliminary due diligence and site work was we looked around to sort of see what was happening. One of the things that we did not do was any more aggressive testing. You already have testing that's going on, and as of right now, there's nothing wrong with the site. What we wanted to be very careful of was that through our investigation, we didn't want to discover the need for corrective action. Because if we discovered that need, we would be mandated to report it, and then you guys are on the hook to get this stuff fixed regardless. So there is concern here. This is a site that should be addressed. As of right now, there's no reason to think that there's any pressing need to do it tomorrow, unless the DEP shows up tomorrow, right? But this is just a matter of time before you're going to have to address this. And again, I hope that makes sense. So what do we see when we go to the Pleasant Street landfill? I don't know if you guys have gone to this site. And to be honest with you, like, this site is where I played as a kid. I grew up on the South Shore down in Marshfield, and like, this was exactly what you'd want to be as like a 12-year-old kid on your dirt bike. There's pallets, there's car parts, there's old bikes, there's like not good stuff. Like, there's exposed trash, right? It's an overgrown field. You know, it's what you would expect from an old landfill. It does look like that there are some people that still kind of go there and hang out, right? Particularly when you get to the sort of far side. And when we look at this, this is where the wetlands component is. You know, as it comes down here, you know, you see some signs of activity by people who are trying to hang out and not necessarily be under the watchful eye of anybody else. What you'll notice in this picture is there's a little pipe there. That pipe is evidence of the active monitoring that's going on. That's a pipe that would be used by CDM Smith to test for leachate. Leachate is what you're testing the groundwater to see, is the rainwater penetrating through, getting into the trash that's decomposing, and pulling anything into the groundwater. So it's pipes like that that tell us that, you know, there's nothing to be concerned about today. But if you go just a little bit further to the right-hand side of this photo, you're going to see that's wetlands. That's marshy. It's all frozen over ice, or was frozen over ice over the weekend. You know, so that is the concern that I have. And this entire part of the project is the only red flag, might be a little bit too harsh, but that's the only sort of flag that came up and said, as we are doing our economic analysis, if that didn't exist, it's capping the site, right? When you think about this landfill, think you got ground, you got a pile of trash, you got a layer of dirt on top of it, right? If it was lined, there would be, again, a membrane liner underneath, and then the capping system would basically create like a pod in place. There is nothing keeping the leachate materials from the trash from getting into the rest of the groundwater. And this area here is going to require some special attention and probably some additional environmental mitigation work to ensure that what's going on over here is incredibly not getting into the groundwater. Okay. So as I said, as we're moving forward, and in our economic projection, we have allocated additional monies that would be available in case what we're seeing is, oh my God, there's actually like $2 million more work that needs to happen in this area. So that's kind of what we're looking at when we think there. This is cheesy, I'm apologizing. It seemed really clever when I wrote it. Our vision for this site, it's the 3 R's: reclaim, restore, and revenue. You know, what we want to do is we want to reclaim this site for public use. Whatever that use is, you know, right now, this is not something that's very, very useful to the town, right? We have a vision that this could be something that is an attraction. And as such, it would actually also help revitalize the area, right? Like you look at the different businesses that are around, you look at the different sort of functions. There's a lot of industrial stuff in that area. But if you create a nice park, if you create a dog park, a reason for people to come, you know, that can motivate larger change and can actually do more to make the whole area better. We want to restore the environmental protections. That was kind of a force with the R. We want to create more environmental protections. We want to you know, take this site and ensure that there is not going to be a future harm, right? And then this is a new source of revenue for the town. Baked into our project, it not only pays for itself, but we have allocated money as a tipping fee that would be a cash payment to the town. A tipping fee is usually monies that are given to the host community of a landfill for this kind of material. You know, if this was trash, you'd be getting, you know, $5 or $6 a ton for this. On a project like this, we've got probably a couple bucks, and you know, as we would work forward, we want to work with you to sort of figure out what that number could be, so long as it works for the economics of the entire project. But you know, we're looking at conservatively $600,000-$700,000 of free money that would come in addition to the construction of new amenities, in addition to the environmental protection work that we'd be looking to do. If you guys have questions at any time, please feel free to tell me to shut up and to do that. So what is the opportunity? The opportunity that we see on this site is to utilize the remaining landfill capacity for use as a soil project, right? This is a landfill. It was designed as a landfill. It was site assigned by the DEP as a landfill, and it was intended to take trash, right, by the powers that be when it was created. We want to use the remaining capacity for soil disposal, and this is kind of soil called COM97. And the revenue that's generated from the COM97 disposal completely pays for everything that we're talking about. And the most important part of this is we were looking to address and correct a present and future environmental issue, right? We see that we are playing a waiting game right now, and if we can get ahead of it, we can fix it, and hopefully that would be good. So what is COM97? Regardless of who you go with to do this project, again, I would strongly recommend Cleanfields, but I'm kind of biased. You're going to get issues about COM97. People don't have a strong understanding of what it is. COM97 is contaminated soil, but it's not hazardous material. COM97 is the dirt that is generated from pretty much any urban or suburban construction, right? You're building a new school. You demo the school that's there, you dig up a new foundation. All of the dirt that you just dug up for that school has to be tested. It's COM97. It needs to be disposed of, right? But it is important to note, it is non-hazardous. It is not specified. It is not classified as hazardous material. Every time that these projects happen, every load of soil gets tested. And it gets tested to determine, is this RS1, is this RS2, is this COM97, or is this hazardous material, right? Hazardous materials have to be taken somewhere completely different. COM97 is dirty soil, but it's non-hazardous, and it is, you know, good for a project like this. And as I said, it's soil that's generated from urban and suburban developments. Why this can work? This can work because, as I mentioned, the Pleasant Street landfill is already site assigned to take trash. And soil, I would imagine, is preferable to trash, right? We're talking about, you know, contaminated soils that need a home, that need a place to go, you know, and it's going to generate some level of economic revenue. If you wanted to make a ton of money, open it up for trash again, because you're going to make 3-4 times as much money with trash. But you're also going to be taking a lot more risk with trash because there's so many more contaminants, you know, and as trash degrades, that's when you have off-gassing of methane and of sulfurs, and that's where you get the smells and all that bad stuff. The COM97 does not have any of those materials in it that generate those gases, right? So we would then bring in the soil and put it down there and then shape it and construct the other environmental controls that we'd need to move this project forward. Why does this work? This works because there are only a handful of sites in Massachusetts currently available to take COM97. The state of Massachusetts ships over 1 million tons of COM97 soil out of state to the tune of $150 million on the low end. Developers are taking the dirt that they have, they're loading it on train trucks, and they're sending it to Ohio. They're spending 3 times as much money just on transportation to get this out of state so it can have a home. And as it's going out of state, it's passing sites like the Pleasant Street landfill. And when I say win-win, I mean this is win-win. This is a win for a developer because they're saving on costs. This is a win for a town because you're generating revenue and addressing this kind of potential environmental harm. The biggest problem that we've had is when we've been talking to folks is this sounds too good to be true. And it is. It is true, but it's a good deal, I think. We can divert that soil from leaving the state, going to Ohio, and maintain it here and command a high price. Because again, they're still getting a cheaper price than sending it out of state, so we can still command a high price to keep the soil here and generate the necessary economics to pay for all of the construction and pay for all the work that we want to do. So our preliminary economic projections here, our cost projection has this at about $9.4 million, right? So where's the difference between the $9.4 million and the $5 million that Doug had mentioned? One, inflation, his number was a couple of years ago. Times have changed since then. But the majority of the difference is because we're bringing in new soils, new materials, more work needs to be done for those soils, right? Our capping costs come in at about under $5 million, a little bit under $5 million. That does not necessarily include the additional environmental mitigation that we need to do, or the environmental controls around the wetlands on that border edge. And that also doesn't include any of the construction work that we do to prepare it for solar or to create the recreational parks and fields. But when we're looking at this project, and again, we have a little bit of a buffer in there, there is no reason at this point for us to believe that the town would need to come out of pocket for anything. So, and it's also important to note that any money that we make on the project, we're the last to get paid, right? So if there are things that need to happen, the money is going to be available to make that happen for this project. This isn't something new. There's lots of these places. As I mentioned, Granite Links is one of them. Millennium Park in West Roxbury is another great example of it. There's like 20 soccer fields out in West Roxbury. Jack was actually involved in the construction of this project and in the sort of community relations side of it. But this is, if you've ever been out to this, it's phenomenal. You go there on a Saturday, you see so many soccer games. My kids played soccer there. It was amazing. Dennehy Park in Cambridge is another good example of this. This is in North Cambridge, kind of over by Alewife. It is a gorgeous park. It used to be a landfill. Now they have all sorts of community spaces and community concerts and the like. And Skyline Drive or Skyline Park in Brookline, you can almost see that as the landfill. This is yet another example of it. I want to take a moment here to sort of just touch on why this hasn't been done already and why Beach Street happened, but Pleasant Street didn't. It didn't happen because Pleasant Street isn't a great project. Pleasant Street is not. All of the great projects were picked over by much larger companies years and years ago, and they were all using big dig soil to make that stuff happen, and they made a ton of money and did all that kind of stuff, right? This kind of project is going to take a little bit more special care and attention, right? And big companies would look at this and say, it's not worth our time. We can make more money doing other things, right? We looked at this and we said, this is kind of our niche. This is what we're looking at. And we're in conversations with a couple other communities in the South Shore to do other similar projects. There are these opportunities that are available. Just the big companies' margins, it doesn't make sense for them to do it, right? That is where we are, and I am obviously open to any questions that you may have. As we talk about next steps, that's sort of where Doug takes over and you guys have some decisions to make. But is there any question that I can answer for you today?
Actually, I have a question. In terms of, should this route, we go this route and we undertake this process, can you just give me an idea of how the timeline works? Like what kind of time is involved from the actual beginning of said contract through to the completion of whether it be solar or a dog park or a sports field?
There are a lot of questions. There are a lot of different variables that would give us a good answer on that. What I can say is that the likely permitting pathway through DEP could run up to 12 months to 24 months. I think we can probably streamline that process a little bit and get that down. When we get to the actual construction work that needs to happen, and the engineering will probably also take like 6 to 8 months or something like that. And we would start permitting and engineering concurrently so that we can sort of shorten the time period. One of the bigger factors that's going to sort of dictate timeline is the number of trucks, right? I could get it done in a day if you'd let me put like 20,000 trucks in that one day. That's horrible, right? So one of the things that we would work with you on is to develop what the cadence for the materials is. You know, do you want 30 trucks a day, or do you want 20 trucks a day? Do you want 50 trucks a day, right? That is going to dramatically impact the timeline that we'd have to do the work that we'd need to do. Does that make sense?
Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question for Doug. What's the current cost to monitor the landfill?
$40,000 is.
Per year?
Yeah, but I want to just confirm, actually, I think we got the budget in the packet here. It's always risky when I look something up live on TV. Yeah, it's 40,000 per, so it's 40,000 a year for the Beach Street monitoring and 40,000 a year for the Pleasant Street landfill monitoring. So for this one, it's 40, because we're only talking Pleasant Street.
Yeah, okay. So if we have a capped and have it, developed.
You're
then-
still monitoring.
Still monitoring.
You still have to monitor it.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Okay.
Still trashing it.
But
Okay.
the
Yep.
question that you'd have is, let's say you wanted to develop it for solar.
Yeah.
Then you're generating revenue, right? You're already paying the $40,000 a year, and you're not getting anything for it.
Yeah, right.
So you can get revenue from solar. You can get sort of improved quality of life with pickleball courts or dog parks or those sorts of things. And so, Granite Links, Millennium Park, all of those, they still have the monitoring going on because those are still landfills that need to make sure that the systems are in place and the systems are working.
So what if you do all the development and then find that there is leach going on?
Then we're responsible for fixing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. And is that complicated? Scary. Is that a complicated thing to do after something's been?
So, I mean, like what you would do, so the capping system's usually a non-permeable membrane.
Yeah.
So like if you did this and you realized that like afterwards they did some testing and they found leachate, you'd have to tear it all up and then redo it.
Okay.
So yes, it's very, like
Yeah.
it's that's a
Right.
big
Well,
deal.
I figure.
Right, yeah.
So the key is not to have it leach at all because of the membrane.
Exactly. So
And,
yeah, when we're using a capping system like this,
Yeah.
because it's not lined, what you'd want to do is create the capping system in such a way so that any rainwater that comes gets diverted completely off of the entire area where the waste is, right? So you're diverting the water so it doesn't get in. If you have like a tear
Yeah.
in that membrane cap,
Gotcha.
then water gets into the bad area, and then that's the
Understood.
problem. And I would also just suggest, chances are the timeline of when this landfill was active and when it became inactive, I'd be willing to bet that the intermediate cover soil that's used, so when you have a landfill, you don't just leave the trash there, you cover it with some dirt. I would say that it was common practice that the intermediate cover that was used was COM 97. So right now, there's worse than COM 97 that's exposed, but there's a bunch of COM 97 that was probably used just to cover everything. What you're missing is that membrane cap, right? And as Doug had said, that's going to be like $5 million that you have to use.
So do you all take care of the drainage and stuff?
We take care of all that. And so
Okay.
so the reason why there's 6 months of engineering is because people get out on site, they do a lot more topography. We actually work and have our operations partner and our engineering partner come together so that an engineer can come up with an incredibly good idea,
Yeah.
but that incredibly good idea may not realize, well, we need to have a road, we need to have access. So
Right.
so bringing those folks together tends to produce better results, right, with respect to the engineering.
Yeah.
And so all of those contingencies, that's why I said when you get to the edge over by the wetlands, that's the only place that we look at and we say, this is different. This needs some special attention. We're gonna need to do some extra work around that area to ensure that those environmental controls are working.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
How many other projects like this are you currently working? Because I know you said you're new, but like how new? Is this going to be your first one, or do you guys actually done?
This will be the first one.
Okay.
You're racing right now with another community that we are sort of at a little bit further along than this project. That's a solar project that we're going to be working on in another community. That would be moving forward. As I said, Jack is actively working on one of these projects in another community that he was involved with, that he's running all on his own prior to us coming together to form Clean Fields. And all in all, we have 5 projects that are working their way through the funnel. I would suspect that, I mean, if you guys want to vote tonight on it, I'd be okay with that. You know, but I would suspect that there's no reason why we can't do all 5 of them. And again, barring your vote or your contemporaries in other communities, right? Like, we will be doing these works. We will be doing these.
Okay. I guess where I was going with that is, I don't know, I'd feel more comfortable if you had a little bit more of a track record than we're going to be the first one. I guess
Yeah,
that's the,
so,
yeah.
If you want me to
Yeah.
Sure. Chair? Yeah, as a group, we've been working together here for a couple of years, but I have probably 40 years, close to 40 years experience with landfill projects, doing exactly this. And it's, I'm glad to hear that the town's being innovative enough to look into what do you really want there. That's kind of the ears that we're listening to. The basics of capping and closing the landfill, it's not the issue. It's what you want to have post-closure. And that's what the community wants. And some of the things that Jay has talked about, a lot of this is public involvement, to see what the town of Rockland really wants to see there. But we can go over experience and projects that I've worked on. But this is not new to me,
Okay.
And our operational partner also has a lot more experience in moving the dirt and working on these sites. So.
Okay. And the way the funding works because it seems like you guys might have to wait a while to get paid. So how do you manage to do that?
So what would happen is we would enter into a lease agreement with the town. So we would take control of the site. And then we would start our engineering and permitting work and having discussions with the DEP. We're estimating probably close to $500,000 on those things, and that's all money that we're spending before a dime comes in, before a dime of solid COM97 comes in. This is what we're putting out to make this stuff happen. But then we are contracting with developers or other folks that handle the soil as the disposal site, and we then bring it in, and then honestly, as they're bringing the dirt in, that's when we're getting the revenue.
Okay.
And through the chair, there's also bonds, security bonds and performance bonds that will be part of the project.
Okay.
The town's guaranteed the project will be successful.
Yeah, that's more where I was going to say, I would hate for, 5 years from now to you guys, for whatever reason, just stop doing what you're doing and we're kind of left holding the bag, so.
Yeah, and I would also suggest this isn't going to take 5 years.
Okay.
To get to your question,
Right.
24 months is what I would suspect. Things could change, but as we are projecting this thing forward, I would look at this as 24 months of active work.
So it's not just, 12 months to get DEP to bless it, that this is, you're working on it as you're kind of going through the DEP process,
Yeah.
okay? So it's not, we have to wait until they go, give you the green light.
No, I mean, like, we're not digging anything until the DEP has given us the appropriate permits that allow us to do it. But there are provisional permits that would allow us to, like, as we're entering along, there are provisional permits that would allow us to start accepting some materials to store on site so that when we get the green light, we're actually able to do a lot more work. And I would suspect that we're probably also gonna have to do a little bit more preliminary landscaping work to, like, remove a lot of the brush and remove a lot of the vegetation that's come up and clear the area. I would imagine that's all stuff that we'd probably start on prior to the heavy lifting.
Okay, so hypothetically, in 2027, we could be done with this, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
And every step of the way, like, if we can make it faster, we're gonna try to meet whatever your need
It's
is.
to your advantage to get it done quicker, yeah.
I
And
didn't
then
think about that.
So, the overall capping and whatnot, that would be the analysis of whatnot, phase one, but at the same time, to what extent does the overall, I know that there'd be collaboration with the towns so that we would come together and agree upon what end use would benefit the town the most. Where in your where in the process would that decision have to take place? Is it right at the very beginning, or in terms of, I know you have to.
I think we could probably go back and forth on it. So one of the things that we need to do is we need to file for a post-closure use permit with DEP.
Okay.
They probably would want us to delineate so like if we're creating recreational fields and you're like, do we want a soccer field or do we want a pickleball court? That's different than do we want recreational fields or a solar farm, right? The sort of broad strokes we'd have to determine on the front end. If we wanted to look at some potential mixed use, right? We want to work with you to develop what those options could be. So if mixed use is a possibility with some solar and some recreational, then maybe we could look at that. This is not a huge site for that kind of mixed use, but there could be something there that we could do. But if you're saying we want 2 softball courts and a soccer field, later we decide we just want 3 soccer fields, like that's easy.
Okay, great. Do you have any more questions or comments tonight?
No, I had about 12 questions I wrote down, but you did a pretty good job of answering everything throughout the course of it. I just want to go back one more time, just for the residents to hear it before we make any kind of a decision. No cost to the town of Rockland.
No cost to the town of Rockland.
Okay.
You get money. You're going to get a tipping fee.
Yeah.
And I want to throw a caveat on that. We have some money built into this budget that gives us some flexibility, right? We would be working with you. If that wetlands area was such that it needed significant environmental remediation, then we would probably talk with you about using some of the tipping fee money to also help with that. But I also said we're the last to get paid. So, if we end up making no money on this project, but we get to do the project, as you said, we're new to this. If we end up making no money, I mean, my kids won't be happy, but that's worth it. And it's also worth it because this is why we're doing it. We're doing it because we want to clean up these sites. We want to fix stuff.
So I think, from my perspective, as somebody that grew up in this town and is familiar with some of the areas of that site that aren't quite visible from the road from my younger days, I think it's a no-brainer that we repurpose this land for all the things that we've heard residents asking us about for years, such as passive recreation, some dog park, pickleball has become huge. Nobody has any place for that. I think it's a no-brainer at no cost to the town. A project that we've had kicked to the side for years and had no plan for. I think this is a perfect opportunity for the town, and we'd be foolish to think we didn't take them up on it.
And at the same time, one of our foremost goals has also been to try and alleviate taxpayer money. So knowing full well that we need to cap this area, and that's just a question of time, that it seems to be a great, and if I may use your word, win-win, in that we could find that solution and then at the same time possibly, obtain a revenue generation entity as well. And as you were saying, great fields or whatever, we could then
I think it's a project that the residents will really get behind when they hear about it. So
I would also just like to add, I think one of the stronger value propositions that we offer as a firm is our commitment to community engagement and community education, right? I don't want to shy away from any questions. That's why we're leading with the fact that we're going to be using COM 97, and I want to educate folks as to what COM 97 is, because there are folks that will really get excited, and not in a good way, about those kinds of materials. And that's because what they're thinking of is when a gas station gets demolished and you're digging up the gas station, so it's oil soaked and gasoline soaked kinds of material. That's not what we're talking about. This is contaminated, non-hazardous. And we want to, again, aggressively engage the community at every level with meetings, with office hours, and honestly talking with the abutters just so that they understand what the project is.
I definitely see the merits of, and the importance of the communication acts, attributes of that. So with that said, tonight we've had our introduction and really appreciate your coming in. And then, Doug, as I understand it, we basically would then decide whether or not we would issue an RFP and invite other firms in to discuss this. Or
Right, so it sounds like there's a consensus you'd like to pursue considering an option like this, and I agree. I think it makes perfect sense. So I
Right.
think then the next question would be, because I provided you the information that was reviewed by council, and I can get into the technical reasons, but we can spend long enough already. We're not required to issue a competitive request for proposals, but it's always a good practice to do that, and that's certainly something, we can do. And so I'll kind of defer to you on if that's the direction you'd prefer to go in, or if, based on what you hear tonight, you want us to continue the conversation just with this one firm and keep it going with them. Or if you want to think about it some more and make a decision at a future meeting. But that would be the next step, is procurement or not.
What's the timeline of the RFP?
If you were to,
2 weeks, 30 days?
yeah, I think it would be closer to the 30-day time frame. Maybe even a little bit longer, because I've never done one like this specific one before, so it'd take a little bit longer to review. So say 2 months, because we're doing the budget, we're going to town meeting, I'm trying to be realistic about the warrant and all that, so this would be an after, the more I talk, the longer it's taking, you notice?
Yeah.
This is going to be, I'd say this is going to be after town meeting,
It sounds like a headache to me, Doug, I think.
yeah, after town meeting.
feedback from the board?
Well, it seems like these gentlemen's companies, they are experienced and passionate, and I always like to root for underdogs, like you're new, right? So I would make a motion to continue with these guys without an RFP.
And I do appreciate the due diligence that you've done on the site to prepare it, even just for this introduction to us as well.
And obviously, we would appreciate that, but there's no expectation, right? Like, this is, we understand what we're doing, there is risk involved with respect to the RFP process, so we would respect anything that you decide. We'd respect taking the job more, though.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think the presentation was great, but I do think that we should, do our due diligence and go through the RFP process. We don't know what else is out there. This is first that we've heard. Right now you're the leader in the clubhouse, and if nobody comes back, and if other people do come back, there's nothing that says we won't come back to you guys anyway. I mean, everything you guys have done to this point has been, I think, great and eye-opening, and really gives us an opportunity to reimagine that space. But I think we owe it to the residents to follow an RFP process and see what else is out there as well. And expedite the process, I think, as much as possible.
Yep, sure. And just to clarify for the public's benefit, I know the board knows this, with a request for proposals, that's not the same as what's colloquially referred to as going out to bid, where you spec out a project and go with the lowest cost bidder. When you do a request for proposals, there is a price component, so there'll be an amount, how much revenue would be generated to the town, but there's a whole non-price technical proposal that's all just qualifications based, and the RFP allows the town to not necessarily go with the firm that is offering us the most money. We could go with a firm that might be offering us the least amount of money, but is, we think, possibly the most qualified and has the most experience or whatever. There's more flexibility with that. So I just want to be clear that an RFP does not mean just going with the low bidder that might be the least qualified. It's the opposite of that. So.
And I guess who would write that? Would you or your office, or, you mentioned that you're not that familiar with these type of projects, so.
Sure, so I'm very familiar with writing RFPs in general, so I have a lot of templates with those.
Yep.
So the only difference here is just the scope of work. So the rest of that whole document is all standard. So for the scope of work, I'd consult with CDM Smith, who's our engineer. I'd consult with our land use attorney, Bob Galvin, who's familiar with these types of projects. And then if I needed additional help, I'd reach out to others. But I think between CDM Smith and Attorney Galvin, with the specs, that's probably.
So that's all the technical stuff that you were mentioning, that we would look for a very specific skill set, so to speak.
Right.
But you're comfortable with coming up with that skill set or that menu that we want.
Right.
Everyone
Yeah,
check
I am,
off
because
on.
there's
Okay.
really two things. There's the scope of work, which again, CDM Smith, can help us with. And then there's the evaluation criteria, because it has to be very clear how we're going to be reviewing and ranking. And again, I think between CDM Smith and Attorney Galvin, we can pull it
Okay.
together.
If you're good with it, then I agree with Mike, we probably should go that way.
Yeah, and I think that we owe it to the residents to actually go through the RFP process. But I think we've made great strides tonight in that I really appreciate your presentation, and I really, I think that I look forward to hearing more, and I think this could be
We
the
will
beginning of
certainly
something great. Great.
And don't let that take anything away from the
No, no,
presentation. I
that's-
thought you guys covered everything. Like I said, I had 12 different questions that came up during the course of it, and you answered it within the next breath.
And we will actually leave all of our contact information
Perfect.
with
Great.
Doug.
In
So
case
if
we
you
have any
guys have
follow-ups,
any
yeah.
questions at all, please don't hesitate to call me, to email me, to reach
Cool.
out to Danny or to Jack.
Okay.
Right. Again, that's, I think, what we bring is a level of transparency, a level of engagement that I think makes a difference.
Wonderful.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks a lot. All right, I'll talk to you later.
All right.
Thank you.
Next, we have open space appointment, Melanie Ritson Monks, or actually, Doug, in the question of time, in
Yep.
terms of the,
The public hearing?
Yeah.
I would recommend you do the Open Space Committee appointment, because that should be very quick, and we
Okay.
can certainly do the CDBG waiver after the hearing. That'd be my recommendation.
okay, great. So if I may call up Melanie Ritson Monks, please. Hello.
Hello.
If you could please introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Melanie Ritson-Monks. I will be a resident of Rockland 8 years this year. I live on Crescent Street. Over the last few years, I've talked with friends and individuals who have lived in Rockland all of their life. Some of them work in Rockland, about my interest in getting more involved in my community. I live on the rail trail. I back up to the rail trail. I'm on it all the time, walking around. I love green space and open space. And I decided to look into, were there any committees that were needing individuals to fill, and found open space. I'm in corporate work. I'm a director of operations for exciting work of corporate pension plans. So this fills some of my time. But the interest really is getting more involved in my community, helping to preserve and expand the open space. So I love the presentation that I just heard about, and hoping that I can make a difference and get to know people more.
Well, we certainly appreciate your desire to help, and then I do see here that on February 18th, your application, it was reviewed and approved by the Open Space Chair, Donald Can. So
Great.
with that, do we have any questions or comments from the board?
No, she's certainly qualified.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to appoint.
Wonderful. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Great.
Welcome to
and
the
thank
Open
you.
Space
Thank
Committee,
you.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Next, we're gonna skip ahead to what was supposed to be the 7:30 public hearing. And if I may call Assistant Town Administrator Courtney Beauregard and Attorney Galvin to the front. And if I may have a roll call from the board to begin the 7:30 PM public hearing pursuant to General LC 138, Section 64, on potential modification, suspension, revocation, or cancellation of inholder's license to sell alcoholic beverages to 167 Union Street LLC, DBA The Banner, William T. Banner, Barry, manager. Roll call vote, Select Board Member O'Loughlin,
Yes.
Select Board Member Ellard,
Yes.
Vice Chair Childs,
Yes.
and me, that's a yes. Okay.
All right, good evening, members of the board. Before I ask Attorney Galvin to come up, I just wanted to make a brief introduction as to how we arrived at this hearing this evening. In early January of this year, it was brought to our attention that there were some issues that had been reported at 167 Union Street. Our health department, fire department, and building department responded, and upon entering the premises, found significant safety concerns and code violations. These were documented and corrective action was requested. Upon further review, the department heads, with department heads, there were additional concerns and questions raised about the validity of the establishment's innkeeper's license. Additionally, upon reinspection of the property, there had been no action taken to correct any issues, so obviously ensuring public safety is our #1 priority, and so we reached out to Attorney Galvin to help us navigate this process moving forward. So with that, I'm going to hand the floor over to Attorney Galvin and invite him to speak. And while he's up here, I'm just going to handle this timeline.
Thank you.
Thanks, Courtney.
Good evening, everybody. So what you've been handed is a timeline that was created both by Allison Quinn and myself, which kind of just gives you a detailed background of the things that have occurred here at 167 Union Street. I don't think it's important to read everything, but I'll probably highlight a few things. This property was acquired by 167 Union Street LLC, which is a limited liability company, I believe owned by Mr. Barry, back in April of 2023. At the same time, in April of 2023, Mr. Barry went to the Zoning Board of Appeals and got a special permit to operate the Banner Pub there, and there was an accessory parking issue as well, but he was given those special permits. And shortly thereafter, you granted a alcoholic beverage license, which is a little different than our normal one. It's an innkeeper's license. It's still a Section 12, Chapter 138, Section 12 license, but it's an innkeeper's license. So that means that the alcohol could be served in the areas of the pub and actually into the rooms. So in order to qualify, you as the local licensing authority received an application. You were told how the business was going to run, who was going to own it, and after you granted an approval, it went to the Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission for their investigation and review, and received an approval there. So this property has been running since, as the Banner under this current ownership, since 2023. On November of 24, Mr. Barry did apply for renewal. Every licensee in Rockland, regardless whether you're an innkeeper or you're running a restaurant or you're running a pub, has to get a license renewal every year, and he applied in November. And he applied under the same LLC that was issued the original license. Unfortunately, thereafter, for financial reasons, there was a foreclosure. And the first mortgagee, which was a realty trust that had lent the money, did actually complete the process of foreclosure and made entry just a few days later after the application for renewal was made. There was a successful bidder, a person by the name of Eric Perry, and Mr. Barry apparently made some arrangements with Mr. Perry to have his right to purchase the property at foreclosure assigned to him, and the mortgagee actually sold the property to a new LLC formed by Mr. Barry, called 167 Union, without the word street, LLC. Different entity, a little bit more money, and the property was mortgaged to a private financier, RDWAB SPV LLC of New York. And instead of the original amount of money that was borrowed, which was 1.254, now the amount of money was 2.350, $2,350,000. Probably for reasons unrelated to this property, there was a second mortgage put on the property to another private lender for another $570,000. Both of these mortgages were also accompanied by what they call a conditional assignment of leases and rents. So if someone who's borrowed money doesn't pay their mortgage payments, the lender can demand the rent from the tenants in the property. That's all that we know about the title to the property. So the title to the property today stands in the name of 167 Union LLC. There have been, I would say, minor violations early on. The Board of Health notes indicate that there were some inspections and some minor issues that needed to be done in 2023. There were some minor food violations, not unaccustomed with restaurants and things of that nature, all appear to have been resolved. The most significant issues really kind of started in 2014, and at or about the time the renewal was coming up. And one of the early ones was December 20th, Deputy Haney requested Mr. Barry to address some issues with the fire alarm panel. Apparently the fire alarm panel is an older panel, and the door on the fire alarm panel is not secured. It was taped shut, and the belief was that because there were a lot of tenants there, they had space heaters and other equipment plugged into extension cords, which is not a good thing. It's likely that the fire smoke detectors were being triggered, and they needed to adjust the fire alarm panel so that everything wouldn't go off. Probably you have to ask the fire department for a little bit more information about that, but that's my limited understanding. But he was ordered to address those issues. And it is a significant health safety issue for the residents there, and actually for our first responders. We always do an annual inspection of the property, and we would ordinarily, before we grant a renewal, have all of our inspections done, but for some reason the inspections weren't done before the renewal was processed by your board. And at the beginning of January, the building department and the fire department actually got out there at the very beginning of the month in order to make their inspections of the property, and that's where we really see the more significant issues coming up. I don't want to cite everything that happened here, but the building department identified some building code issues, identified them in a letter, asked them to be addressed in about 21 days towards the end of the month. The fire department found 4 fire code violations of a more concerning nature, asked those issues to be addressed immediately, and the health agent, Delshon Flip, found some health code issues. We asked, I think fairly politely and without much vigor, that these issues be addressed. They were not addressed. As we get to the end of the month, there was some follow-up inspections scheduled to see whether the issues that were outstanding had been addressed, and they were not. On January 30th, there was inspections conducted by the health agent, the deputy fire chief. They saw building code violations, including uses of extension cords, power strips, space heaters, mini splits that had been installed either to heat the units or cool the units were not working. Common areas were missing the required lighting. There was a hole in one of the unit floors, and there was no heat in the units at the end of January. So there was a correction order issued by the Board of Health dealing with what she felt were violations of the state health code, and she did not deem it to be serious enough that that all the residents had to be moved out, but issued orders requiring those issues to be addressed between 7 and 14 days. Deputy Haney, who was very upset that things had not been addressed as he had requested, issued a citation on February 4th for $300 for 3 violations of the state fire code. He returned on February 20th and saw 2 of the same issues that were still outstanding, so he issued another citation for $600 on February 20th. There was also a follow-up inspection with the building commissioner, the health agent, and the deputy fire chief on 2/20. The building department observed that there was some significant electrical issues here. I spoke to electrical inspector John Kemet, and I don't want to understate or overstate this, but Mr. Kemet was very upset by what he observed. The wiring in this building is very old. I'm trying to remember the exact name, knob and tube wiring. I may be botching that a little bit, but indicated to me that he was losing sleep. He was so upset about the condition of the wiring in this property and was upset someone was going to get hurt. He's told me that this type of wiring is a leading cause of fires in a building. There was a mechanical permit that was needed for each of the mini splits that had never been obtained, and the building commissioner had asked on a number of occasions to have done. And then there was a further correction order issued by the health agent for many of the same issues. This time, instead of 7 to 14 days, she ordered all of these to be fixed within 3 days for compliance. None of these issues were fixed. On February 21st, the town learned that the ABCC had received a tip that the property was purchasing alcoholic beverages from a liquor store. They conducted an investigation with their supervising investigators and special investigators and spoke to Mr. Barry, who, to his credit, admitted that he had done the wrong thing, had been purchasing alcohol other than from the wholesalers that he's obligated by law to purchase it from, and provided some receipts. The ABCC is likely to issue some type of a citation in connection with that. That is an absolute no-no, violation of Chapter 138, Section 23. The health agent, deputy fire chief, and building commissioner all, after I became involved, all went back out to the property on February 26th. They took 47 photos. Those are in your packet. If you haven't seen them, I'm sure that any one of the health agent, the deputy fire chief, or the fire chief and the building commissioner can explain what those photographs all are about. There was a food safety inspection, which is a little different from the health code inspection, and there were 15 violations. Again, I don't want to overstate those. Those were minor in nature and curable. Things were not clean, but that's included in your packet. And as a result of that, we began looking a little bit more deeply into what was going on with respect to the licensure on the property. And what has happened is when the property was foreclosed and a new LLC was generated, 167 Union Street LLC ceased to hold and operate the business in the property, and a new LLC, 167 Union LLC, has begun operating the Banner Pub. They are not licensed by your board to operate. So the license that was picked up and has been used since the beginning of the year is a license for an LLC that's not operating the business, and there's a new LLC operating. So based on that and other issues, I recommended that the town administrator give notice of a hearing and ask them to come in here tonight and explain what's going on. The building commissioner and electrical inspector have issued further letters on February 27th, following their February 26th visit, again requesting some engineering reports on the condition of the fire escape in the property, asking for mechanical permits and a manual report on mini splits, evidence of bathroom ventilation. They wanted work that they had observed ongoing on the third floor that was without permits, applied for immediately, and they wanted all those applications due before March 5th. They did not meet that deadline. So both the building commissioner and the electrical inspector issued further directives in that regard. Deputy Haney, again, very straightforward. These issues bother him immensely. Saw that the issues that he had been asking to be corrected immediately and been 2 citations before were not corrected, so he issued a third citation on February 28th for $1,100, basically for the same violations. So the total amount of violations for the fire code right now stands at $2,000. So I would outline the violations as being as follows, and I do believe that some work has been done, but I don't really know exactly what's been done since last week. We have health code violations in the units. We had some food code violations in the pub area. We had fire code violations in the inn units in common areas for which there are outstanding fines. We have electrical code violations in the units. We have building code violations in the units and throughout the building. As I indicated at the beginning, they had a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals, but that special permit issued to the name of Bill Barry or William Barry, it has never been transferred over to the current entity that's operating the business. So they have a zoning violation. They transferred the license without your approval, which is a violation of Chapter 138, Sections 15A and 23. They were purchasing alcoholic beverages, as they've admitted, a violation of Chapter 138, Section 23. Mr. Barry was kind enough, at our request, to send some information about his current insurances, because there was a concern that there was no insurance on the property. In studying the policies of insurance in the binders that have been provided to me, the liquor liability policy, which protects people from injury in the event that someone is overserved or leaves the restaurant and has an accident and they've been drinking there, is in the name of 167 Union LLC. It's not in the name of the license holder. In order for that business to be open, I would absolutely tell you that they have to have a proper liquor liability policy, and they do not. The current commercial liability policy is in the name of an entity, 167 Union Street LLC, which is not the owner of the property. That's a problem. There is a commercial liability policy for the cafe portion of the property, and there is an LLC that does operate the cafe portion. I'm not certain whether alcoholic beverages are there. So those are the facts as I see them. I asked the department heads that were involved if you had any questions to come tonight, because they saw it firsthand and I'm only reporting to you what they've told me. I think you have a real serious problem here. You have a business that transferred its liquor license without your approval. You have a business that, for whatever reason, had some financial problems and changed its form of ownership, and no one knew about it. Another problem. You have maybe a licensee that's not taking some pretty serious health, safety, and fire code issues as seriously as they need to take it. We have outstanding fines. We wouldn't tolerate it from any business. We're certainly not going to tolerate it from a business like this. And I could help you, but you might want to hear from the license holder or their representatives before we talk about what your options are, and I'll be happy to come up, but I'd be happy to make some recommendations to you. Unfortunately, my recommendation might seem draconian, but candidly, they have a business here that's not licensed running the pub, and that license should come off the wall and be surrendered or suspended until such time as they cure their issues. That'd be probably my recommendation. They'd have a right of appeal. Absolutely, that's the case, but we have significant issues that I think the board has to act swiftly and firmly regarding.
I had a question for you, Attorney Galvin. It says we're going to discuss tonight and decide tonight on a suspension, which I understand, a revocation, which I understand. What is a cancellation?
So
what is that?
When we gave notice to them on February 26th, that we had that delivered by the police department, and I appreciate the police department's assistance in this regard. The statute gives you the option of modifying, suspending, revoking, or canceling the license. All of those are options for you. Modifying means maybe modifying the hours. Suspending is stopping them but not taking the license away. Canceling the license means that it doesn't, it's gone, and it's very similar to revocation.
Okay. And revocation means that they wouldn't get the license back.
They wouldn't be eligible for a year to get the license
For a
back
year.
if you revoked it. Yep.
Okay.
So, in fairness to Mr. Barry, he did retain counsel. Counsel reached out to me. We've had a constructive dialogue, which I think is very helpful and appreciated. And I think they probably should maybe respond to what you've heard, and maybe they have some solutions that might make sense to you.
Okay.
But I'll stay right here in case you have questions about what you'd like to do for disposition.
Thank you.
Okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Can I ask you one more thing
Of
before
course.
we go to Mr. Barry?
Yep.
Has there, I know that Mr. Barry has owned other properties in Rockland. Has there been a similar pattern of behavior with those properties?
I don't know the answer to that
Okay.
question. You know, I try to look at every circumstance, and, you know, people make mistakes in other circumstances. I don't know what Mr.
Okay.
Barry's track record in Rockland is. I haven't had to bring a lawsuit against him or deal with it, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have a history with some other boards. But, you know, some of these things are technical, some of them are complicated, but, you know, and there appears to be some financial distress here of an undeterminate nature. So maybe some mistakes were made, and I think you probably ought to hear from Mr. Barry.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Good evening. My name is Walter Sullivan. I represent Mr. Barry and his family, Alicia and his wife, who run this business together. At the outset, the Barrys take this very seriously. With respect to the limited liability company and the modification of name, I don't think there was any perception by Mr. Barry or his lender or lender's counsel, who asked for that slight change in the limited liability company, that the license should also be altered. It was something that was done, as I understand it, from Mr. Barry and from counsel for the lender with whom I spoke today, sort of at the last moment, and it's unclear why they did that, but I don't think anybody really perceived that this was going to be a significant change in ownership. The members stayed the same. The manager on the license stayed the same. But it was something that was required by the bank, and I think everybody lost sight of the significance. It's obviously a violation. Mr. Barry understands that. My suggestion to Attorney Galvin, and I have the authority of the mortgagee's lender, is that we could put the property back into the original limited liability company to make it conform to the license. There's a little bit of work involved in that, because both mortgagees will have to redo their mortgages, which I understand they're willing to do. It's probably something we could do, if not by the end of this week, by early next week. And I know Mr. Galvin hasn't weighed in on whether or not that would satisfy him. Mr. Barry is in the remodeling construction business. He's been doing a lot of the work there himself and with other subcontractors. He, you know, with respect to one of the fire code violations, it is an old fire detection suppression or detection system, and finding the replacement mechanisms for it that had failed was very difficult. It arrived today, it was installed today, it has not yet been inspected by the fire department, but an electrician was there today. That electrician is also coming up with a proposal to bring all of the electricity for the knob and tube wiring into compliance. And obviously we'll work with the building inspector and the wiring inspector, the fire chief and everybody else. The fines will be paid promptly. You know, there are other minor violations. Mr. Barry did make a mistake. It's not a pattern that he bought alcohol from a retail establishment. On a couple of occasions when he ran low on supply, he rushed over to Luke Liquors and purchased alcohol. He acknowledged it as soon as the ABCC came and asked him about the tip. He knows he shouldn't have done it. It was just one of those situations where he was trying to keep the business up and running. So mistakes have been made. He acknowledges that. I don't think any of them with the intent of being derelict was done. So I would ask that the board take that into consideration. This is a family business. It's an old building that a lot of issues preceded, I think, Mr. Barry's ownership. It's certainly a bigger project than he anticipated, as is evidenced by the financial issues. But I think he feels like he's righting the ship. He is in the process of trying to also have a cafe there that doesn't serve alcohol. Any modification of insurance due to the changes in name I think we can care for that in the short term, and then the long term, if council believes that my proposal of putting it back into the original LLC is satisfactory. What we're hoping is that this board will consider some type of proposal, a timetable, where we can remain open as long as we satisfy town council with respect to ownership and the license, and we could come back and let the board know where we are in taking care of some of these violations. Some of them can't be fixed overnight. As I say, this is an older building. But we did take care of the fire detection system. It does require an inspection. I'm certain that the fire department can get out there in short order and confirm then that's been done. But it was done by a licensed electrician. Same thing with pulling permits. Mr. Barry will care for that. So that's what we would pray for. Obviously, not having the liquor license is going to be very difficult to keep this business open and running. So I'd be happy to respond to any questions. Mr. Barry is here with me as well.
So I just want to address for a second, Lori brought it up with her question to Attorney Galvin about pattern of behavior. It most certainly is a pattern of behavior. It is a pattern of behavior with this gentleman. When we issued him the license, I asked him directly, based on your previous properties and the issues that we've had in town with those previous properties, what faith would I have in you that you would follow the terms of the license that we were permitting you at the time? And you assured me that you would follow the terms of the liquor license and that you would follow the rules that the inspectors put upon you. You assured me that the past properties would not occur again. But here we are within 2 years of that conversation. What was that, April of 2023 when we issued the liquor license? And that was the question I asked you. You talked about, you deflected and you talked about doing, a 5K and stuff like that, and doing things, in the town. But this is most certainly a pattern of behavior as far as your unwillingness to follow, or I see it more, it's unwillingness, but it's also lack of respect for the licensing boards that give you the license to operate within the community in a manner that you're protecting the citizens of the community when they enter your establishment. And this has been something that goes back. And look, I'm a business owner myself, and I would never, I understand how the business climate is out there. People do not have money, and I empathize with you for the fact that it's a financial strain at this time and that you have any kind of burden. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I didn't see this coming. I knew we would be back here and that at some point there would be a violation of the permit and the license that we gave you. It's been the past property, and I asked the question for that specific reason, knowing that we'd be back here in this spot again for this exact same reason, that you were not going to pay attention to the terms of the licensing agreement. And I'm not shocked. I don't know.
Had I known the LLC needed to be in the original name, I wouldn't have allowed them.
But it's not even that. It's not even that. You've gone through it. You've had all these the exact same inspectors that are sitting here in this room inspected another property of yours, and they gave you the list of all the things that need to happen there to be fixed there. Of course, but now you go to a different.
Don't talk over the chair.
But now you go to a different property, and you have the same issues that you were having at the previous property. And I understand, times get tight, money gets tight and times get tough, I understand. But you have to address the problems, and when the inspectors come in, the last thing you can do is, thumb your nose at them and not address what they ask you to do. They were more than fair by giving you enough time to address these issues. You could have worked out a deal with them and explained to them, listen, I'm having issues right now, I can't get there, can you give me even longer? And put together a plan, told them a date. They're very reasonable people. They want to see businesses succeed. They're not in here, none of us are here to drop the hammer on a business and have it be closed. I'd hate to do it because the Banner is a great place and we want that to be successful in this town. We need it to be successful in this town. I don't want that to be an empty building. But I asked for assurances last time, and now you're going to give us assurances again this time. I just don't believe it. I don't. I'm sorry. That's just how I feel. I felt as though I was lied to last time, and I feel as though, coming back and saying that we're going to address these concerns, I don't buy it. I don't buy it.
Can I ask a question? How many residents are currently living in the building?
There's 11.
11? Okay. So I spoke to you to get your side of the story. I spoke to the inspectors before this meeting. I read all of the notes very carefully. And our number one responsibility on this board is to ensure that no one perishes as a result of residing in or frequenting any of your properties. Okay, that comes above anything. And another thing that's kind of in my craw was March 28, 2007, my house burnt down. My husband and I, in the middle of the night, had to pull our children out of our burning house. So I know from a visceral perspective how horrific that is. And I can't live with myself if we grant you time to fix this with people living there and with people drinking there. And, you know, Deputy Heaney, on a scale of 1 to 10, what does your gut say that a potential fire could happen?
It's very difficult to predict, but that, because of the age of the building, how unkempt it is, it's probably one of the biggest target hazards we have in town.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, I appreciate that you plan to address things, and you are addressing some things, but I really can't live with people in that building with space heaters that are overriding whatever system there is, and it could, you know, potentially spark a fire. That just goes against everything that is in every cell of me.
I agree. The safety of our residents, the safety of the town, the safety of anyone who would go in to enjoy your facility is our utmost important. And, you know, I was on the board when we granted the license, and we've all been rooting for the success of the banner. It's you know,
Iconic in town.
it's a beacon in the middle of the town. It has wonderful history, but with that comes a responsibility of, you know, being able to ensure the safety of those that frequent there, and and live there. So you're right. The safety is our utmost concern. Please.
I was gonna say something when he was talking and follow up with her and then get back to you, but, the, space heater's been addressed. I've told everybody not to use them, but some people will use them anyhow, even if it's 80 degrees in there. I mean, you go to Home Depot every year and they sell out. I don't know where they go. It's like a snow shovel. You go to get a snow shovel and the snowstorm hits and there's none. So I'm not sure how that all plays out, but that was an issue, and I believe I addressed it in such a way I put heat in the apartments. And I told the people not to use space heaters. Now, if they're in the apartment and they're unplugged, I can't do much more than that. Put it in writing to them and tell them not to use them. So the space heater is an issue, yeah, I can believe that. And the mini splits with Mr. Rubel, March 5th is tomorrow. I've already talked to Michelle. I'm gonna go down and see Mr. Rubel about the mechanical permits. So that should address that. The size of the mortgage, there's 2 houses on that mortgage. You gotta review it a little bit more.
I reviewed it.
Yeah, well, it's the Banner Pub in 7 Collins Lane, and that's why it's up higher than it was, as well as construction costs. And I can get you a breakdown if you'd like.
I read the mortgages. The first mortgage, when you originally bought it, was of 1.2 million.
Right.
And the new first mortgage is 2.35 million. And
It's
there
2
is
properties.
then you have a second mortgage, which is encumbering 2 properties for another $570,000. So
Yeah.
that's how I read it online today.
Well, I just wanted you to know that it encompasses more than just that property.
I saw that.
Yeah. So it just didn't come across that way to the people. At least it didn't come across that way to me when you said it. As far as any safety issues there with the townspeople, yeah, it's been hard to keep up with Mr. Rubel, Tom Heaney, and the health inspector, Del Shawn. But it's not like I haven't been there. I've fixed the hole in the floor. I've put the fans in the bathroom. I have to vent them. Tom knows that, last time he was there with me. He asked me to put them in even though there's windows there, but he wanted them, I said yes. Anytime they want anything, they can tell you, I say yes. I don't say no to anything. It just takes me longer, and fine, I should have went to him and said I need more time. But I was under a lot of duress. I had to move one house to another, and there was a lot going on at the time. So, here we are. The LLC's in jeopardy with the insurance, which could be rectified pretty easily. The safety issues, fine, Mr. Heaney has fined me, but the part came from Florida, it took 10 days to get here, I paid for 2-day mail. It shouldn't have happened, but it did, and that's
Excuse me,
why
Mr.
it was
Barry?
delinquent.
If we could just have Mr.
I will
Harry.
definitely take point with Mr. Barry's representation that he ordered that a month and a half ago when we started this process. He admitted to me on our last
I got the-
inspection that he ordered it about 3 days before. As opposed to the other fine, all he had to do was go to Home Depot, get a battery for it. He told me he did that, didn't even do that.
He tried to fix that issue the day before. It would have been a simple trip to Home Depot. I have been over the world when he tries to do some of these stuff, but he never does these things.
I did
Okay?
buy the
We have
battery at Home
chased
Depot.
Mr. Barry from 379 Union Street, 315 to 321 Union Street, to here. He has been a nemesis. He is gonna get somebody hurt. You should not revoke it, you should not continue to have his license, revoke it, suspend it, the hardest punishment you can get, because he will not take and listen to any advice any inspector in this town has. And yes, Mr. O'Loughlin, you're correct, you will be back here with them on another day.
I did change the battery in the smoke detector.
Not
And
when
then-
I saw it.
Well, it's encased in an exit sign, and when it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So when I bought the new exit sign, I had to wait for the electrician to come. He came today, he put it in. I can't put it in. The equipment is old, so you can't put reconditioned equipment in. It took me longer than I thought. I should have been more upfront with Tom and said, listen, Tom, I could have done this, I could have done that, but the fact of the matter is we're here. Now, yeah, I've had issues in the past. You can talk to anybody over there that's a tenant. You can talk to the patrons. Nobody's complaining. The people that are complaining with the inspections, I've been addressing them.
Are
I
the
don't say no.
patrons and other tenants aware of the safety violations?
Yes.
That you have them,
Yes.
that you put them in place, and they're happy with that?
No, they're not happy with it. They know I'm working
Okay,
on
so-
it. I just redid the floor in the bathroom a couple days ago. I fixed the hole in the floor. I've got an electrician there. Every 24 hours, I got the electrician going in the apartments, checking it for the electrical inspector. In the first month I bought the place, the original electrical inspector had me change outlets. And I thought that was compensated enough, but the new electrical inspector wanted more. I didn't argue with them. I said, my electrician will meet you. So that was a Thursday. He called him Thursday, he didn't work, called him Friday, they got together Monday. They said, okay, you gotta go over there and come up with a plan of action. But we have the plan of action. He called him again today. I don't believe today was the day he worked. The plan of action is to take out the knob and tube that he doesn't want there and redo it. And the problem with the fire alarm in the exit sign has been addressed. I'm sorry it wasn't done in a more orderly fashion, but it is done. As far as Tom, the building inspector goes, like I told you, I called over today, I'm gonna go in and see Tom tomorrow with my manual J's and talk to him about the mechanicals on the mini splits. But
Excuse me one moment, Deputy Haley.
I spoke with the electrician that pulled the permit to do the fire alarm work. He no longer says he works for Mr. Barry, as he had to wait for a bank check today for $7,000 in money he was back owed. He said he called the building department today and was closing out his permit, and that additional work was done over and above the permit. So I don't believe Sean Conroy is the electrician of record for that property anymore.
Sean did the alarm today. He doesn't want to do the knob and tube. I bring in Andrew Curran today before even Sean even probably talked to Mr. Heaney to do the knob and tube. Because if Sean doesn't want to do it, it's fine with me. He got paid. He hooked up the equipment today that he said he would. And he told me he was discontinuing the permit, and I said, it's fine, I already have somebody that'll do knob and tube work for me. A lot of guys don't wanna do it, because it's not fun. You gotta cut open the walls, and you gotta, it's egregious.
Excuse me, Mr. Barry.
Thank you. I wanted to make two comments. The first is in response to Mr. Barry saying that no one's complaining. The health agent has in fact received complaints from tenants, and that's part of what initiated all of this. And that's part of my concern is if we hadn't had complaints for tenants, I don't think anything would have been done, and then I think something terrible could have happened. And getting to Mike's point earlier, our inspectors are very reasonable. Just like Mike said, our mantra here is always to enforce the code, but also support businesses, not be unreasonable, give them time to correct. I've never seen our inspectors so worried and concerned about the safety of a property as this one. And there's 5 pages, single-spaced, typewritten of bullets of violation and non-compliance over and over and over again. So I would personally recommend a very stiff response by the board tonight.
I had a question, Mr. Barry. How many years have you been in the remodeling business?
I just got my license renewed again, maybe 45 years, 40
Okay.
years.
Okay, so in coming onto this property, you had no idea that any of these things were wrong, or that, having...
I'm working on that property, and that property, I just gave Tom Rubel's office a zoning opinion letter to make them all one-bedroom apartments, and pretty much demolish the whole second floor and bring it up to code. Tom's here, he can tell you, I bring him the zoning opinion letter so I could do that. That's what I've been working on. And in the meantime, this stuff that I'm doing to protect the tenants is absolutely priority. I mean, fine, I'm not the quickest guy on the planet, but,
Okay, so...
they did come in, all 3 of them, and gave me a lot of stuff to do, and I've been addressing it. It's nothing that I've always tried to do the right thing, and things have been done. It's not like nothing's been done. Like I said, the floor's done, the bathroom's done, the fire alarm stuff is done. I got a guy to do the knob and tube. The plumber was there today. Del Sean wanted the plumber there to check because the hot water's not quick enough. We're gonna put a hot water loop in. He's there today.
So Deli, with the residents that have complained, are any of them cold this time of year?
Yes. Yep. I've spoken to several of them, all like anonymous. I refer to them as he or him. But I'm in contact with a lot of them. After I sent them my letters, probably 4 or 5 reached out to me. I don't know which particular units they were. One was very concerned about dying, and I really felt bad. They were like, another one had actually made a communication with me that said that she's afraid that she's gonna die in the house.
So is this after Mr. Barry put in the floorboard heating, or
This was
before?
I believe it was before
Okay.
the heating.
And so have you talked to them after?
And they're still using space heaters because the baseboard heaters are not efficient enough. And I think John Kemick knows more about that, as I'm not an electrician. But when I went into the units, most of the units were 54 degrees. And in the code, between the hours of 6 a.m. and 11 at night, it has to be 62 at least. 64 and 62 from the midnight to the morning. And none of the rooms were at that temperature the first time around. The first time around, and I just want to also state that many of his violations that I noted are items deemed to endanger. So with that, he should have fixed this sooner. But again, I spoke with Mr. Barry and I said, I will work with you if you need additional time. And he said, yes, I need additional time. So instead of a 14-day reinspection, I gave him a 21-day reinspection. And then nothing was done.
Oh.
In 21 days. Nothing was done.
Okay, is that typical? That, or do people typically get things, in your experience, remedied?
Typically,
Yeah.
When you're given a violation, the person fixes the violations. And Mr. Barry knows. I had him in my office the day after our inspection. He came in willingly, and I said, I want you to succeed. I want the banner to succeed. We will work with you. And I told him that, and he knows that. And then when we went there the next day, nothing was done. And then I gave him 72 hours, because at that point, I wasn't gonna give him another 30 days. It's just always something. And there are little things that he could have fixed. Little things that he could have fixed, and he didn't do any of them.
Okay, and Deputy Heaney, your fines, or your citations have not yet been paid?
No.
Okay.
And actually, as frame of reference, I could have gone more severely on those fines. I did not implement the maximum of those fines every time I issued them. So he could owe probably about another $1,500 if I had done that. Again, we are seeking compliance.
Yeah, and I mean, we try to be a very business-friendly board, and at all, I don't know that we've had, as this board, an issue as severe as this with any properties, except the other properties on, under Mr. Barry's watch.
Yeah, it's just, it's all a question of safety right now. Attorney Galvin, you had mentioned that you have recommendations, or?
Yeah, so Attorney Sullivan was recommending that the license remain in the name of the original LLC. I would be okay with that. The problem is the liquor liability policy is in the name of the new LLC. So that would need to change. And you've issued the current license in the name of 167 Union Street LLC. So if you transferred the pub back into that LLC, that would make me happier, but I don't think they should be open without liquor liability insurance. So I think that's a solvable issue, and that would be satisfactory to me. I don't know how else to get compliance other than to ask you all to consider compliance with the other things that he's got a responsibility to do as a condition. So, the ABCC will handle the liquor violations for the purchases, so I'm not worried about you all handling that, but I think that the fines that are outstanding to the fire department should be paid. I think that our inspectors ought to believe that people can live there safely before you allow them to begin operating again.
In the meantime, right now, Tom Rubel, in terms of your opinion, how are the conditions right now for the residents to continue living there?
A lot of that would have to do with electrical issues, but on my end, William did a lot of work in that building without permits, okay? To this day, there's work that's been done in there without permits. He did put in the vents in the bathroom. They're not vented outside. They're in the room, but they gotta be vented outside. No permits was pulled for that. There's a lot of electrical work that's been done down there with no permits pulled. You're gonna have to talk to John about that. That's him. And the mini splits. None of them have been, he says he had the manual J. I gave him until tomorrow to give me work that, to pull permits on work that has to be done. And then after tomorrow, I gave him 21 days to complete everything. And that's my report. But John has a lot more issues in that building, electrical.
Could you please share,
Sure. Well, right now, as it sits for me, I have 2 open permits, and I've spoken to both of those electricians. I've had great conversations with them. They would love to go in there and finish the work that they've requested to do, but their major complaint was they weren't getting paid. You know, he's saying he paid his electrician $7,000 today, but as of this morning, the conversation that I had with one of the electricians, so I prefer not to say their names and stuff, and, you know, they both feeling like they don't even want to be there because he's uncooperative. And, you know, he's already just sitting here tonight, he's accused me of not being available, which I don't think is untrue at all. You know, I'm very available. I answer everyone's questions and I try to be as helpful as I can. So there's a good example of what we're dealing with is, you know, we try to work with him, we try to be nice, but then he turns around and throws you under the bus every opportunity he has.
Tiffany?
I didn't throw him under the bus. My electrician told me he tried calling you today, and that's all I said.
Well, we had 2 conversations today. I had conversations with both of them who have outstanding permits, because I want to make sure that those permits get closed out. And so they've been very cooperative. And
Well, I
they
can go
feel
out to
that
my
we're not-
truck and get the receipt that I paid him with a money order today.
Oh, that's kind of inconsequential.
No, but
because
then also
at the
the-
time that I had
Hey,
the conversation.
Excuse
Through
me,
the
John,
chair.
John, the board was asking whether or not we feel it's safe to have people living in there.
No, absolutely not. I feel very concerned about the safety of those people that live there. And I've met a bunch of them. They seem like really nice people. And I would hate to think that I would see on the news where those people were.
I'm
sorry, and then my next question, and I know that this would depend on how quickly and efficiently that,
to get the
the work could be fixed, but what's a realistic time frame do you think that it would take to make these fixes so that it was safe in your mind?
I was asked that question by the health agent, and I felt like 72 hours to have an actionable plan of what was going to happen, and I expected that, you know, that would have been worked on almost immediately. You know, I think that all of those appliances should be removed. Any wiring that's connected to knob and tube should be disconnected. And we went on a second inspection after that discussion, and nothing had been done that I could see. And most of the pictures that you see are pictures from after the first time we went out and asked for him to do something within 72 hours. So, I mean, the pictures kind of speak for themselves in that respect.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, you know, I was just struck by something the building commissioner said, because Mr. Berry explained earlier that he has, I think, 40 or 45 years of experience in construction. But yet we had a lot of work done without pulling any permits. So I think any responsible builder, construction supervisor knows that they have to pull permits and get things inspected. So my concern with that is these are willful violations. If these aren't just accidents or mistakes, or I'm not as quick as the other guy.
Cutting corners.
So.
Mr. Berry?
So the knob and tube has been there since the building was done, so I'm trying to rectify that. The problems that are there have always been there, and they've been addressed, fine. In 72 hours to change knob and tube in 11 units is a lot. My electrician, Andrew Curran, the guy who was gonna do the knob and tube work, who was there today, did contact your office, and I'm sorry I didn't say it, but you didn't call him back. He's gonna call you again tomorrow. And it's gotta be on your voicemail. That's all I meant by that. No disrespect, no disrespect. As far as any of the other work Mr. Rubel had said, you know, I've done floors. You don't need a permit to put floors in. I've done a lot of painting. I've cleaned up a lot of things there. I've given them the action by the engineers and the architects to do the whole renovation, which will encompass a bigger permit. The fans he asked me to do, he knew I had a problem with getting my license redone because the governing authority in Boston was closed. So, and as soon as I got my licenses all squared away, as they closed the office in December and didn't allow anyone to do any in-person visits, so you had to do everything by mail or by email. Anyhow, it took a long time. He's got my licenses now, and I called Michelle to go and see him. He was doing weights and measures today, and that's when I told her I was gonna come in and see Tom about permitting in the manual J's tomorrow. I'll talk to him then about anything that he feels other than the fans that, and the mini splits that need permitting. And I've asked him how to go about the mini split permitting. Some of the other towns, it's just an electrical permit. Some of them let CSLs do it. It all depends on the governing authority in the town. But I looked it up on Google, and he's right. I need manual J's and I need some stuff given to him, and I'm gonna address it. So maybe I'm slow, but I didn't create the problems. I'm taking care of the issues of an existing building. Like I said, when I bought the building, the electrical inspector at the time just wanted a simple few outlets put in, not to redo all the knob and tube. Now, the new electrical inspector wanted it done, fine. You know, Sean Connery doesn't want to do it. Andrew Curran does want to do it. He needs to work. Sean doesn't want to do the knob and tube because it takes a long time. But the people have been there for 20, 30, 40, 50 years using the same electricity. You know, and if it requires me telling the people again, you can't have space heaters and stuff, how do I monitor them from doing things like that? And it's kind of like saying you can't smoke in the building. I got no smoking signs everywhere, but people smoke. There's 2 or 3 tenants that smoke there, and if I take them to court, I don't think they'll, you know, for smoking. I just, you know, there's not much you can do. So it's the same thing. If someone wants to plug a device in, how do I tell them no? I mean, it's a.
I had a question for you, Tom. In Mr. Berry's other properties in town, had he not pulled permits and done work anyway in those properties as well?
Yeah, there, but I can't remember what the issues were. Mr. Berry, you were saying that people have been living in there for 50, 40 years ago, but look at all the work and look at all the wiring that you've done, according to John, that was not there 50 years ago.
Yeah, but
And
I got
that
a
was done
permit
without
for it.
permits.
No, I got permits for the wiring now. I got permits in the spring to do all those GFCI and down the hallway to do the loop for the smokes, because Mr. Heaney asked me to do it when I bought the building. I got the permits to do the fans, and I got permits to do the electric heat. That's all on record. And I'm sorry, but
Is there permits for all that, John?
Not that I could see.
Yeah.
You know, I've done research and.
the fans aren't they're permitted by the electrical engineer, I mean electrician.
If you let me finish, you have 2
Yeah.
permits. One of them was just closed out, and you have 2 outstanding ones. One of those is from 2023. And I have to be honest with you, the permit is so vague, that, you know, I can't really ascertain really what was done or what wasn't done or should have been done, you know. It's sufficiently vague.
That was
I
the
couldn't really say.
original outlets, the electrical inspector wanted.
You know, I can't speak to those permits that are closed at this point, but I can only speak to the ones that are open. And, you know, as for the mini splits and the electrical permits that were pulled on that, you have, I think, 4 of them, of which only one of them has a permit for, that hasn't been closed out. So, you know, there's obviously been stuff that's been done that I can see that I do not have paperwork for.
Well, I was told by the electrician today that he had a permit for the 2 fans, had the permit for the electric heat, and he pulled the permit for the mini split
A mini split.
rewiring.
One mini split.
Yeah, but the one mini split is wiring 2 of them. You gotta look at how it's wired.
Yep.
It's all piped all together.
All right, excuse me, Dasha.
Yes, I'm sorry. I just remembered, last year, I had received a phone call from HUD asking me to do a housing inspection for a voucher. And when I saw the address, it was 167 Union Street, and I was like, well, that's a rooming house. So I went there, and Mr. Barry had attempted to make one of the units an apartment, again, without no permits. So when I met the HUD inspector there was a makeshift kitchen. It wasn't piped in, it wasn't anything. He made an entry to a bathroom, a shared bathroom, right from the unit. He was going to make it an apartment, a one-bedroom apartment, with a little kid. And that's what I was really upset about, because this kid thought he had a real apartment to live in with his son. He had custody of his little boy, and Mr. Barry kind of tried to like say he had a fake kitchen. And it was, the email, I have the email, I can send it to you too, that the HUD agent was very mad.
Okay.
That was two different apartments. So one of them was unit 1, and that was a tenant who put that equipment in there himself. And I told you that at the time. I go, how can I stop someone from putting in a sink and a vanity that's not plumbed? And that guy, you know who that person is.
I don't know him personally.
Yeah, you do. And then the person that had the kid, he was a black fellow, and his son, and he was in 2 units. They had 2 rooms, and that was in unit 6 and 7. And that was totally different. So you're getting them mixed up. And we can go back there, and I can walk you through it.
Right.
But basically, Corey Mason and his son were in 6 and 7, and Mike Scopa, who was trying to satisfy so he could get visitation rights with his daughter, did that. I told him he's an idiot.
Excuse me, Mr. Barry?
Yeah.
I think we're gonna move
Yeah, the
forward.
names.
Yeah.
So my
Seeing the names of the residents.
my advice would be maybe Attorney Galvin could just give a little bit of advice as far as
Please.
closing the, whether they should close the public hearing, then deliberate and take a vote, or if they should do that before they close the hearing or after. Just give a little practical advice.
A legal question. If Mr. Barry moves forward and builds out all these apartments he wants to do with the banner, does he have to put the residents up in hotels at that time? Is he responsible by state law
If
to
he's
do
doing work and the place is not habitable,
Yeah.
yes, he'd probably have to move them to someplace else.
Okay.
Attorney Galvin, is it now
I
time
think,
to?
I think if you want to hear any more, or if you have any other questions of Mr. Barry or his attorney, the time to ask him, then I would close the public portion of the hearing and then we'll deliberate.
Okay, anybody have any other questions for Mr. Barry?
No.
Okay, with that said, roll call.
Anybody from the audience?
Anybody from the audience have any questions, Mr. Barry? Further? Please.
Mr. Chairperson, when you take into your consideration tonight for your decisions, please keep in mind that it's just not the residents of 167 Union Street or the Banner Pub or the cafe that's there. It's due to the nature of that building, the construction, the close proximity to 159 Union Street, 155 Union Street, that whole block is in jeopardy. It's old construction there, and it is a concern for that block for the fire department.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Okay. With that said, roll call vote to close the public hearing. Select Board Member O'Loughlin?
Yes.
Select Board Member Elliott?
Yes.
Vice Chair Childs?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's me too. Okay, with that said, we're closed and deliberation.
So, I mean, my recommendation is, what Attorney Sullivan mentioned with respect to getting the license in the correct name, if they provide an assignment and, certificate of authority that Attorney Sullivan will know how to do, I would be okay with the license coming back to the entity that it should have stayed in. But I do think that the premises should be suspended until the liquor liability policy is in place at a minimum. And then I think you have to deal with the issue of the outstanding violations. And the easiest way to get things done is not to be able to, operate the way he wants to operate until he brings the building into compliance. And I don't know how long that's gonna take, but I think we could take it on a weekly or whatever basis, but I want you, who rely upon your inspectors to say when it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Madam Chair, I would suggest that we suspend the license, at least until our next meeting. We clear the residents. Mr. Barry can come back to us with our inspectors, and they can update us on his progress at that point. I give him 2 weeks from now, and we make a decision going forward.
So if you make a suspension, you're also going to want him to.
The liquor liability insurance as well, actually pending till when that gets done.
He should be able to resolve
very
liquor
quickly.
liability policies quickly. But I do think that the license needs to come down off the banner.
Mhm.
All the alcohol has to be
Mhm.
secured and cannot be consumed on the premises.
Yeah.
So the license should be delivered to the police station as part of the suspension. And when you lift the suspension, which will continue this if that's what passes, then the license will be held at the station until such time as your board releases it.
And can you also please reiterate your recommendation for, can we incorporate the safety, what's needed safety-wise in terms of the inspectors, their deliverables within that 2-week period as well, or?
I think that you can ask the department heads or, the building commissioner, the deputy fire chief or the fire chief and the health inspector and the electrical inspector to make an inspection on the day prior to your next meeting.
That's
and
on
they
St.
can then
Patrick's
give you
Day.
a status report as to where they're at that time.
Great, any other feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll be here again anyway, regardless. I don't know. I mean, that'd be my recommendation for now, but without saying that our inspectors haven't already given him multiple chances, after multiple
Right.
chances, after extension after extension. And I've been on record saying this before, we have top-notch inspectors in this town. They're experts at what they do, but they're also very generous in understanding, and they are very pro-business. I know that as a fact, and that they are not looking to punish people. It's unfortunate that the times that they give the serious recommendations, the people they give those recommendations to don't take them seriously and try to work out a plan with the inspectors, because every one of them would allow them the time if they were given an honest effort from the person that they're inspecting the premises of. I don't want to take a license away. I don't want to revoke somebody's license permanently, but I feel like that's where we're going to end up with this property. But I think we go through the necessary steps prior to that before, the death sentence on this property. I think you go through the necessary steps. You give the 2 weeks, you suspend his liquor license, you deliver the liquor license to the police department, and you evacuate the residents until the inspectors feel that that building is
I
safe.
don't think you have the authority to issue an evacuation.
Not at that point.
The health agent has some authority, the building inspector has some authority.
Mhm.
This board does not have authority to
Yeah, this is
order
more
the
the
building
license, but-
evacuated.
So our authority is that everything has to be fixed within those 2 weeks,
Mhm.
that's, okay.
Right, and in addition to fixing everything, we need the fines paid and we need all the permits, figured out what should have been pulled and all the fees that should have been paid along with all those permits need to happen before I would consider even talking about this again. So those are, make sure that we're clear about all that financial part needs to happen before I would even want to talk about this again, so.
And most importantly, I know it's out of our hands, but the residents have to
Well,
find a situation.
If we're in a situation where, the health agent concludes that, the building has to, we need more, that can happen independently of your board, so
Yep,
we'll deal with that as it comes.
okay.
Okay.
So
With that, do we make a motion for that next 2 weeks? or-
is
Oh.
my letter still forcible, Bob, where I gave them
Yes.
till tomorrow?
Yes.
To pull permits, and then I give them till the, what was it, the 13th of March to complete my issues.
The health orders, the fire department's orders, the building commissioner's orders are all still in effect.
Okay.
So just getting the sense of the board's, it sounds to me like the board is considering a motion to suspend for a 2-week period, subject to further review at your next select board meeting. You're gonna ask the department heads to conduct an inspection the day before your next select board meeting and to give you a status report as to whether they pulled the permits and rectified the outstanding issues. The license is to be delivered before opening hours tomorrow to the police department and maybe picked up depending on what the board does in 2 weeks.
Do I have a motion?
That sounds like a motion, yeah.
And do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hearing's over. Okay.
Next, we have the Community Development Block Grant Waiver Request.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. Thank you, Tiffany. So, yeah, we have another CDBG waiver request. The board has done these several times each year, every year that I've been here. You'll see there's a cover memorandum from our CDBG. Hang on one second. You'll see there's a memo from our CDBG program director. This is becoming even more common now as construction costs have gone up and the caps that the federal government has put in place have not kept up. And very similar to what we were just talking about, these are all really important improvements that need to be made. In this particular instance, it's a mobile home, and I would strongly urge you to recommend. I recommend that you approve this waiver request.
Okay. Any questions?
Made the motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous. All right, do we have other new business not reasonably anticipated?
I have none.
Okay, old business. FY26 budget. Doug?
Thank you, Tiffany. I want to start by just quickly listing what's in your packet. And I assume you've all read through this already, but just to summarize what's in it, the first page is what I refer to as my budget issues document. This is just highlighting again in the 2 columns amounts that were requested in different areas, and then in order to balance budget, what I'm recommending we fund and what we do not fund. So that's pretty self-explanatory. The next document was an email that I had sent to the school superintendent based on discussions we had. I'm trying to do my best to help the school department be able to have a budget that will meet their needs as best we can, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Next after that is the detailed line item budget, and again, I am proposing a balanced budget, so this is detailed by account and line item. And then the last document in the back is a large ledger sheet document that you can unfold that has my recommended uses of free cash. Some of this are for capital items. It's actually most of it is for capital, and a few things are for other types of things that aren't capital but would require the use of free cash. So just quickly going back to the school budget, we have an excellent relationship with the school superintendent and the assistant superintendent. I'm proud of that. We've been working hard with them. They have a lot of challenges, as you all know. There's quite a bit more variability in their operations compared to our operations. They have a lot of unfunded mandates and variable expenses that come in that are beyond their control. So in working with them, what I've presented to you, and as is summarized in the email that I referenced and included in your packet to the school superintendent, is year-to-year general fund appropriation increase of 4.39%, which is, I think it's like a $1.3 million increase. In order to be able to do that nearly 4.4% increase, trying to be creative and working with the school department, they identified a federal grant that they have received, and in them doing their own due diligence, they confirmed that allowable uses of that grant funding includes paying for fringe benefits, things like health insurance. So in order to get their budget up to that 4.39%,
There's $374,000 worth of that federal grant that we're going to be directly applying to our health insurance costs, directly associated to the school staff that are covered under that federal grant. And so those one-time funds are kind of boosting their operating budget in that upcoming year. For comparison's sake, again, it's about 4.4% increase on the school side. Our increase on the town general government side is closer to 3.8%. Now, I've had additional discussions with Dr. Cron today. They are requesting an additional $250,000 to $300,000, again, to help them balance their budget and have it be as responsible as possible. The only way that I think that we could realistically come up with additional funding to that magnitude, because as you'll see from the free cash sheet that I showed you, which does include other types of operating expenses. You'll see for the schools on that free cash sheet, there's $300,000 that we have tagged for their out-of-district costs, which again, that's not capital, that is more operational. The only way to come up with an additional $250,000 to $300,000 above and beyond that would be getting more aggressive in how we forecast our revenues. And I think the only revenue that would really make sense to do that would potentially be our motor vehicle excise receipts, because that's a revenue that we do share with the schools. We talked about this quite a bit. Dr. Cron and I have different roles. He's an excellent advocate for the school department. They do a great job there. I obviously have to focus on the entire town budget. And what we do here is what every responsible town does in this Commonwealth, which is we're conservative. We're conservative in estimating our revenues and our expenses. And we do that partly so that we're never short in the middle of the fiscal year and have to have draconian reductions in order to cover our costs. We also do that because being conservative is what generates surplus revenue, which is what generates free cash, which is how we pay for all of our capital articles. So the downside in getting more aggressive with projecting our revenues, and when I say more aggressive, I mean projecting more than what we've projected thus far. The downside to that is it's just we're gonna realize it on the other end the following year or the year after when our free cash gets certified. There'll be that much less free cash that we'll have available for our other uses. So this again was a sort of a discussion that I had today with Dr. Cron. I think that this is kind of a policy decision that I'd look for a little bit of guidance from you on whether you feel it's appropriate and would want to direct me to be more aggressive with our revenue assumptions to try to get the school department an extra $250,000 to $300,000. That, if we did that on the high end of 300, that would bring their year-to-year general fund appropriation up to 5.36% or $1.66 million year-to-year increase. It's really difficult, just to state the obvious. We're constrained by Proposition 2.5. We get as creative as we can. They have a lot of costs that are beyond their control. I feel good about presenting with you, but I also feel obligated if the school superintendent feels strongly and has a serious request for additional funding that's needed. I want to present that to you, and especially where I think there is a bit of a policy decision here about an approach to revenue forecasting. I think you should have a say in that. So I hope that's clear. I won't go on any further, but I am looking for some direction on that. And if you have any other questions or comments on the rest of the budget that I've presented.
I had a question. I don't even know how to word it. Can we survive on less than, like if we gave them a 75-25 split instead of a 70-30 split? Is that? So
to summarize what I think you're asking, we currently have a 70-30, revenue sharing agreement. So if we were to change that formula to something that's skewed, or that would just mean we'd have to cut general fund departments to be able to shift the revenues to the school department if we change that formula, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, but I mean, is it possible to do without hurting anybody, or?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
All right. I was just wondering.
Did Dr. Cron get into what this additional $300,000 is for? at all, or he
Yes,
just?
I really don't feel comfortable. I want to be very careful not to speak for the school department, so I don't
So
really.
maybe someone from the school department should come and tell us why they need an additional 300,000 if, before we, I mean, I'm not comfortable just because they asked, I would want to know why.
That's a fair question. Yeah.
Agreed.
Again, just generally, what I can say is he talked quite a bit about the volatility in state mandates related to education that are beyond their control, but I want to be careful and not say things incorrectly. So I hear your question. I can ask him to come to the next meeting.
That would be great.
Are there any other questions or comments on the budget, or everything else look good?
Yeah, I don't think we should get more aggressive on our budgeting, but.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, as a former FinCom chair, I've got two of them here, so that's a bad idea. So if you want direction, I don't think that's what we should do, but I will still be willing to hear out the school why they think they need an additional $250,000, 300,000 before we 100% decide that, but that's just bad fiscal policy right there, so.
That's why I presented it.
I agree with John. As also a former FinCom chair, and we established that policy. And I think we've always projected our budgets conservatively in town, and I think it's worked out well for us since we started taking that approach. Because prior to that, they weren't projected in that manner. And I mean, if we're able to get some new growth around here, then maybe we have different conversations and stuff like that. But until we see new growth, then we're tied to what we have. So.
Right. And that's a good point, Mike, because Dr. Cron and I did talk quite a bit about this, and I've said it repeatedly before. It's going to be a while, 8 years or so, something like that, once our, whatever the year is, 2032, once our Plymouth County retirement assessments are fully caught up, we will be saving millions of dollars. It'll almost feel like an override kind of thing. And then in addition, once Union Point has actual construction built out, there will be new growth. So there is
we can see the finish line.
We can see the finish line.
Yeah.
We just got to get there between now and then. That's the point. But there will be a brighter financial future. It's projected. So I just wanted to say that again.
Yep.
Great. So if we could invite them to
Sure.
come to the next meeting, I think that would be great too.
Yep.
Okay. Next, fire department ladder truck request funding decision. Chief.
And Chief, do you mind if I do a little intro on this? Sure. Is that okay? The chief can obviously speak most intelligently about, the need for the ladder truck, what it's used for, all that. So I'll defer to him on that in a moment. The thing that I really wanted to talk to you tonight is about how we finance this. The estimate that he has is $2 million. The ways to fund this, there's really, I think, kind of three major ways. There's a capital outlay expenditure exclusion, which is voter-approved tax increase. Raise your taxes for 1 year, you generate that revenue, the next year that tax increase is gone. That's from a pure financial perspective, not getting into politics or people's ability to pay or all the kinds of taxpayer input that you obviously need. Just from a pure financial perspective, that is the cleanest way to do it because there is no interest involved. There's no debt, there's no interest. You raise it and you pay it, you're just spending $2 million. That requires a ballot vote and a town meeting vote. The next option would be a debt exclusion, like we're proposing for the fire station itself, schools, things like that. And I included two pages from our debt service calculator that shows if you borrowed $2 million with a certain assumed interest rate for a term of 15 years, you can see that total cost comes to nearly $2.7 million. So the point of that is that's about $700,000 in interest that we're paying if we finance it with debt over 15 years. And we ran it a different way over 20 years, and that is, you can see over $2.9 million. So that's almost $1 million in interest that you're paying. So that, a third way it can be financed, and there's two pieces of paper after this that show these examples, which is a lease purchase, which we've done before for other types of vehicles. So that's basically, you are, and just like people do with automobiles, in their own home, you lease it and you lease to own. You own it in the end.
But there's interest, and the interest rates are higher in this instance than the kind of rates that we could get doing a debt exclusion. So you'll see, I'll only just stick with the first page here. You'll see there's a couple of examples that one of the leasing agencies ran for us, a 10-year, 12-year, and a 15-year term. And you can see those range, if you do the math by the number of years, they range in total payments from $2.6 million up to $3.1 million. So again, you're looking at between $600,000 to $1 million of interest that you're paying. The other reason why this is less advantageous is because in order to do this, we would have to come up with these dollar amounts, the payment amounts, $261,000 or $204,000, whichever way we go, every year for each year of those terms, 10 to 15 years. So what that means is, if you think about our use of free cash every year, right off the top we have to pay for a snow and ice deficit. That could be anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000. Then if we did something like this, another $200,000 to $260,000, there's another $250,000 on top of that. It's my concern there is kind of saddling us, saddling us with 10 or 15 years of another $250,000 plus is that much less we have to work with for all of our other capital requests. Mm-hmm. So again, for me, I think the cleanest way to finance this would be a capital outlay expenditure exclusion. Again, we're going to be asking for a fire station vote this spring. If you want to consider that, we can talk more about it. We internally as a team have talked quite a bit, and we all think having it as a separate question would make the most sense, not combining it with the fire station, give people more choice if they want to vote for one, not the other. So that's, maybe I'll stop talking about that. And I don't know, Chief, if you want to talk a little bit about the need for it, why now?
Sure, absolutely. Doug, my one question I do have, did you run any calculations on what a yearly payment for a one-year debt exclusion would be for an average?
I did. I don't know that I have it with me, so I don't want to give an incorrect number. I can easily put that out later.
That's fine. Yeah. That's fine. Thank you. Board, thank you for having this on your agenda tonight. I'll give you a brief history, and I'll try to keep it quick. September 1999, we took delivery of our current ladder truck. The cost on that was $481,852. That was paid through debt exclusion by the taxpayers. That truck in December of 2000 did suffer an accident, a substantial accident that needed repairs. August 2017, we refurbished this vehicle, $240,000. We coated the frame rails. We, new paint all around. We fixed hydraulics, changed the current, the old lighting system to LEDs, and fixed some communication cables that run along the main ladder that sits on top of the truck. Since then, we've probably spent, since mid FY 20 up until now, we've spent approximately $80,000 in repairs on the truck. Some of those repairs are preventative maintenance, everything that you would do with a normal truck, tires, brakes. However, much of it is hydraulic leaks, air pump systems, the turntable with the actual ladder sits on needed to be repaired, in all substantial. Nothing is cheap when it comes to a fire department ladder truck. So while the truck is extremely reliable, it's a gorgeous truck, it's still in good shape since the refurb, getting parts to repair it are becoming more difficult. It's currently 25 years old, 26 years old this September. In order to order, if we were to order a new truck today, the major vendors are quoting 48 to 50 months to build a truck, and in that includes a $2 million price tag. We got they called today saying that there's going to be a demo truck becoming available maybe in August at $1.8 million. So we do see the inflation in, unfortunately, due to the length of the contracts and the build time now, is all the vendors are putting into the contracts that if there's a large price escalation over the course of the build, they're going to come after what that cost difference it is. So that's where the $2 million price tag comes at. Unfortunately, nothing's cheap with the fire department. And I know we're already, you know, asking for water from an already shallow well. So, you know, it is a big ask, but I'm not sure if this current truck is going to last 50 months. It'll be over 30 years by then, 30 years old. And we are already currently, there's already currently frame rot on the current truck. It was found back in the 2018 refurbishment project. It's been coated, you know, they fixed it, they cleaned it up as best they can, but rot just doesn't get any better, and it will continue to delaminate and weaken that vehicle. So that is why the ask is now.
And can I go follow up on the, thank you, Chief, on his question a moment ago. I should have had this earlier, but I can access my files on the phone. So this is going to sound like a lot, but and not to minimize cost for anybody, but I just wanted to highlight that it is a 1 year only cost. And part of what the Chief and I were talking about, and I'm really glad he asked this, if, you know, the South Shore Tech project obviously passed, but it's going to be several years until those tax increases hit. Similarly, if the fire station project passes, that tax increase is not going to happen immediately. You know, it's going to be a year or two until the larger bonds hit. If we did an exclusion, we could do that now. So there would be the cost, and then that cost would immediately go away before the tax increases from the other ones occur. I think, broadly speaking, for an average family house, it would probably be close to $300. A one-time cost of $300.
Thanks, Doug, I appreciate that.
I wanted to offer something. I know I've mentioned this before, but there's something called the Leary Firefighters Foundation, and they fund equipment, vehicles, education, training, and technology for firefighters nationwide. So,
yep, familiar with the foundation, and I have to look into it further. I don't know if they've ever, you know, donated such a large item. I do know that, you know, they try to hit, you know, smaller equipment, ice rescue sleds, boats.
Yep.
You know, they get more, they're able to donate more to more places for their dollar. It's an avenue to look. Additionally, we have a current application, a grant application that's been submitted to FEMA for $1 million. That's the cap that you can ask for a ladder truck.
okay.
Firefighter Mark Osher, who does all our grant writing, fabulous at it. He's an expert at the process. He's unfortunately pessimistic that we would be considered for this grant. And again, FEMA has such limited funds. They like to fund the smaller trainings, 100,000, 50,000, you know, equipment, you know, at lower rates, so that they can spread out their funds throughout the country more than, you know, just a few, you know, a couple ladder trucks throughout the country for $1 million.
Well, anyway, I sent you the link, and it
Okay,
doesn't hurt to
thank you.
ask.
No, not at all. Worst I can do is say no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Correct.
thank you.
So we got to make a decision tonight if we're
Yeah.
going to put this on.
Exactly, John, because the deadline is the end of this week to be on a ballot for the spring election. So again, I'll just recap the options. There's
Right.
a ballot vote, Prop 2.5, capital outlay expenditure exclusion, a 1 year only increase, no debt, no interest. You could do a debt exclusion. You could combine this with a fire station project, and so instead of a $26.1 million project, it'd be a $28.1 million project. Or you could go with the lease purchase, which has higher interest and kind of ties up a bunch of our free cash for 10 to 15 years.
Just curious, if we were to combine it with the fire station project, then it would be 28 million, and if that was voted ahead accordingly, would you be able to, would that timeline work for you? Like, what in terms of a debt exclusion or combining the two, may I ask, Chief, do you have a preference between the two?
worry if combining them, if the project, this fire station project were to fail, the ladder truck projects failed. Now, they could both fail,
Right.
at the same time. But, putting all the eggs in one basket is a concern for me.
Okay.
And I think what Doug said, sorry, Mike, and
You get-
what
you
what
go.
Doug had said, we're spreading out those payments. We'd be just paying additional interest that may not be necessary.
Look, nobody's gonna like it either way. I think it's just one of those things that it's probably best if we separate the two projects and ask for a separate debt exclusion for
Right.
the fire truck. That way we can speak to the two as very specific separate needs. It just happens that it falls under the same department, but they're both separate needs for that department. This way it also, shows the due diligence that was done by the fire station building department in lowering the cost of the fire station ask. So that's no longer 33 million, it's now 26 million. And then the fire truck, because what would come out of that is, they went from 33 to 28, but.
And then they added a truck.
Yeah,
And I don't want it to appear
Let's,
that way.
let's put the truck separately, I think is the best method.
Yep.
People might push back and say, well, how come the fire station is asking, the fire department is asking for all these things? Well, they're asking because the fire department needs these things. You need these things to protect the citizens of the town.
And one thing to keep in mind is if both projects do pass, is when we do design a ladder truck for
A
the
new
future
station.
of the town, it'd be for
For a new station,
be able to fit
yeah.
into a new
Absolutely.
station and not
Yep.
the current one.
Yep.
I think that's great. And then I also think it would be very imperative to explain that the timing
Yes.
in terms of the 1 year that the other two, tax debt exclusions would not yet have taken into effect. So I think
Mhm.
that would be very important in terms of the timing to explain. So,
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
As far as the 1 year debt exclusion and the comments that the manufacturers building these trucks are warning about increased fees, is that more so if you go with a long-term financing plan, or that could still happen with the 1 year?
No, I think it's a long-term financing or long-term weight of that vehicle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of the 1 year plan, is that determined in the estimate of $300 per family? Is that a conservative estimate of what they've given, or does that give leeway should some of these additional costs that we're seeing across everything in the country?
So the
right
200
now-
million, we would hopefully the goal
2
is to.
million.
200 million dollar.
What kind of truck is this?
Hoping to slip that one by. The
Oh,
$2
you
million,
saved
the
the
$2 million price tag is keeping in mind that build time. But the goal is to come in substantially less than that.
Okay, but yeah, getting it done faster is obviously gonna hurt.
Today's money's better than tomorrow's money.
Yeah.
yeah.
I might have a question too. With the existing truck, could you sell parts or anything like that to?
I don't know.
Pennies on
I
the
do
dollar.
know when we purchased the current truck, I believe they gave like $30,000 for the old truck.
Okay.
So I don't,
It's negligible, yeah.
Yeah, it's small potatoes compared to what we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so if we did a capital exclusion, I kind of like how Doug explained it in the sense that these other, the debt exclusions that are, well, the school and hopefully the fire station aren't going to kick in for a couple of years. Suck it up, put it on a one-time hit and just be done with it if we're going to do this. If I were going to recommend either a debt exclusion or a capital exclusion, I'm going to go capital and just put it out there, rip the Band-Aid off, take the hit in 1 year and be done with it.
Yeah, I think it's the best way to go.
Yeah, I do too.
I think it provides the most transparency and clarity for the person that's in the ballot that day as well. And it's an easier message for us to give to the residents when explaining this to them as well.
Where I hear the consensus towards that, do I have a motion to move that forward?
Motion to move forward with the capital expense.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous.
Great. Thank you, appreciate your consideration.
Right, other old business not reasonably anticipated.
I have none.
Okay, any select board liaison updates?
I got none.
Okay, How about town administrators report and correspondence?
Thanks, Tiffany. I have three things tonight. The first is Donald Can from the Open Space Committee asked me to let folks in the community know that George Anderson he fell and broke his hip. So he is recovering at the Queen Anne Nursing Home at 50 Recreation Park Drive in Hingham. So if anyone wants to send cards to Mr. Anderson, who I know is greatly respected in town, that would really be appreciated. And so we all obviously wish George the best in his recovery.
Yes.
Next, I wanted to highlight that unless something happens, the current legislative authority for having remote meetings for boards and committees and public bodies is set to expire at the end of this month. The MMA is doing a lot of work lobbying and advocating with the legislature to make the current flexibility we have permanent, which I also think is the best solution. It's working well now. It gives each town discretion and flexibility how best to do it. We choose to meet in person. The zoning board, chooses to meet remotely, et cetera. It works well. There is a push with some legislators to try to incorporate in any legislation that's going to make any of this permanent to force yet another unfunded mandate, to force hybrid meetings. And by hybrid, I mean we're both in person. The board would have to meet in person, but anybody from the community and others would be able to meet remotely, on a smart TV via Zoom, to force every single board and committee meeting to meet remotely. So I had a meeting today with Senator Keenan and his staff to urge them not to endorse or forward or adopt that kind of forced hybrid model. And I won't go into the details now. It was a long call, but it might work maybe, say, for this board and this room, but we have so many other boards and committees. It's not just the school committee and the select board. There's going to be tremendous expense, both one-time capital expense for fitting it out, but then recurring staff costs, because many boards and committees don't have any staff at all, and someone would have to be responsible for that. So I could go on and on. I'm happy to talk more about it if you want, but I was urging them not to force another unfunded mandate, not to force hybrid meetings on everything, just make the current flexibility permanent. That's all they have to do. So I just wanted to update you on that. And then lastly, I'm going to hand out a letter I received, and I'm only going to very briefly summarize. So this is a letter that we received. I'm not going to list the people's names, but it was addressed to our veterans agent, Tim White, and I'm only going to read the opening paragraph and the closing paragraph, because I think this is the type of good stuff that we really need to talk about, and I want to really express my thanks to our veterans agent, who does a wonderful job. So this was addressed to him. It says, "Dear Mr. White, my family and I would like to thank you for the exceptional help you provided our late father, a U.S. Marine Corps veteran. To be more specific, you helped me help my dad while he declined in health, so I'm particularly happy to send this note of gratitude. I've often wondered if you realized how much your efficiency and professionalism meant to me while I managed my father's health and affairs, both before and after his death. In this letter, I'd like to make sure you know how much we've appreciated your service to our dad and his family." And there's 2.5 full pages of details, which I won't read. You can read it later. And at the end, he concludes, "I'll hopefully finish my father's affairs soon, but I can already say that the VA part of my dad's care was the easiest, and that is entirely because of you, Mr. White. My family and I are very grateful. Lastly, we realize you are a municipal employee, so we're not sending any monetary thank you gifts to you. However, please accept the enclosed gift cards to hand out to any veterans you think could use them. One of your colleagues told me that you're truly devoted to helping veterans, so we thought you would like this gesture. We hope this allows you to help more of the veterans in your community whom you care for so deeply as they deserve." So I just thought this was wonderful. I want to thank Tim. He's actually going to come in to one of our upcoming meetings to talk about a town meeting warrant article. But as soon as I got this, I wanted to share it with the board and the public. So that's all I have tonight.
Thank you. All right, select board comments. Comments and opinions expressed by individual members do not necessarily reflect the views of the select board and are the opinions and comments of only the individual member. Select board member O'Loughlin.
I have no comments tonight.
Select board member Ellard.
given how late it is, I have no
Yeah,
comments.
that's why I did it. That's why I did it too.
I have two short comments.
Oh, boy.
Short.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to let people know that Senator Ed Markey is having a town hall this Saturday from 2 to 3:30 at the Malden High School. And if you look on Eventbrite and look it up, you have to reserve a spot. So I wanted to put that out there. And condolences to the McDonald family for the loss of Patty. She served our town for years, and she will be missed. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Next, we have, we will be entering into an executive session, and by way of taking a roll call, I will take a motion to enter into the executive session, not to reconvene.
Motion.
You gotta read the.
Yeah, the executive session minutes per MGL Chapter 30A, 21A 7, review and approval of executive session minutes to 6:24 and 5/7/24.
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor? Select Board Member O'Laughlin?
Yes.
Select Board Member Ellard?
Yes.
Vice Chair Childs?
Yep.
And me, yes. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Good night.